1 in 3 people within a 12-month period are likely to experience a mental health issue.
You watch movies from the 80s, the boss says, "Oh, you're looking stressed, you need to take some time off."
Back then, that was when there was such a lot of stigma.
In every meaning of the word, you were one of these pioneers that transformed that from being a stigma to becoming okay that people can talk about it.
Rachel Clements, co-founder and director of the Centre for Corporate Health and Resilia, is a true pioneer in workplace mental health and wellbeing. With over 25 years of professional experience in psychology, she has dedicated her career to reshaping the way organisations understand and support mental health and wellbeing.
93% of Australians are saying that their psychological health is just as important now than their remuneration.
I think it's amazing when people talk about, "I've done 70 hours this week," or "I've slept 4 hours."
We might look at that and say that's a psychological risk factor.
Can the two things coexist? High-performing teams and very good mental health environment. Rachel Clements, welcome to the Martian Logic podcast. Thank you for taking the time. It's great to see you.
Thank you for having me in.
Absolutely welcome. You have masters in organizational psychology. Can you please share with the audience, especially for those younger people that maybe would like to get into your field, talk to us about your journey and what is it that you do now?
Yes, great question. Well, I started off my career with doing very passionate about workplace psychology, which is essentially what organizational psychology is. So I completed 4 years at ANU doing my honours in psychology and did not specialise at all in organisational psychology. But at the end of that 4 years, I realised I wanted to do something about workplace mental health or workplace stress.
Yep.
We didn't have that language back then when I was studying.
Yeah.
So it was really the language we were using was occupational stress.
Is that what they used to
That's
call
what
it?
we used to call it. And that's really what existed in that kind of the mid to late 90s at that point. So I was really passionate about that, and I went on to do a Masters of Organisational Psychology in Perth at UWA. I studied there, and that was a wonderful program because it enabled me to get very educated around the aspects of organisations and in terms of how they function and some of the challenges and how people flourish or struggle in some of the in organisations. But it also took a very wide lens of mental health and wellbeing, although we didn't use that language back then. So really I came out of that degree being quite skilled very clinically. We'd done a lot of our course with the Masters of Clinical Psych students as well.
So where did your passion come from? I'm sorry to interrupt there, but I find it really interesting. You know, clearly you were 18, 19, 20, and you knew I wanted to do that. And that thing was called occupational stress, you said, in the 80s, 90s.
Yes.
Where did that come from? Did an uncle or someone had that? Or where did the inspiration come from? From a movie? From what?
It was actually from a third-year psychology subject I did, and it was an introduction to organisational psychology. And within that, it had a whole lot of information on occupational stress. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I've never been exposed to that. It was, I thought it was just mind-blowing. And I did try to do my honours in organisational psychology, but at the university I was at, they did not have anyone that specialised in that area. So it was really getting inspired at university, really, and discovering a new area of psychology I didn't even know existed.
Yeah. You watch movies from the 80s and let's say a cop movie and the boss says, "Oh, you're looking stressed or you're making some bad decisions or you're taking something personal, you need to take some time off." Yeah. That's, as a young person, we used to see that, and it's really interesting how we used to interpret that.
Yes.
Can you think back to how you viewed the world of stress at work or the mental health at work or whatever they called it then? How did you view that world then, back then?
Well, I would say there wasn't much of there wasn't much exposure to that back then. Back then, that was when there was such a lot of stigma. There was such a lot of stereotyping that if somebody ever declared that they were stressed at work, that really meant that they had something more permanent, more pervasive. So
they
it's
become damaged good.
Yeah.
Terrible
so
risk.
I kind of have been trained in that and came out of that era where I've observed a massive change in our attitudes, in how we value mental health and psychological
Yeah.
well-being at work. Because when I entered into it, there weren't any of those discussions taking place, and that was part of the problem. It fed off this silence. I did a lot of work very early on in my career with the police, and they would quite frequently disappear for about 2 or 3 months with the flu. And that was a really interesting dilemma in terms of people knew it was due to a mental health issue or trauma,
But
but
they don't
no
want to say
one
it. They don't want to confirm it.
was speaking about it at all. So it was really under the guise of a lot of physical health conditions that I was really educated in, and that was around me a lot. And then I saw I've been very much witness to the changing landscape in that place, in the space where it's now a lot more psychologically
So
safe.
really, in every meaning of the word, you were one of these pioneers all around the world. You did your part in Australia here, but all around the world, sort of 10, 15, 20 years that transformed that from being a stigma to becoming okay that people can talk about it and stuff to where, which is where we're at now. Although we're not in 100% good place, still there's discrimination and a change of attitude towards people like that. But we're certainly you can't compare where we're at compared to where we were. So you definitely were one of these pioneers that were part of making that change, right?
Yes, we were very much, especially after doing my degree. I worked for a few years and got some experience, and then really was very passionate about, I could see the issues that people were struggling with in workplaces, and really wanted to set up my own business that specialised in workplace stress. That's what we were calling it. There was no market for workplace wellbeing. We certainly didn't talk about mental health, and this was really in 1999 when I first started the business. But yes, that was really where I discovered my passion. I could see from my consulting work, even as early in my career when I was a very junior psychologist, that the workplace was taking a lot of casualties. That people were not well at work, but no one was really talking about it. And organisations were not on the front foot of managing or even preventing. I was very passionate when we first started the business about preventing psychological harm or psychological injury, but there was no market for it back then. People did not pay to prevent an issue. They would pay to fix it. They would pay to do something about it when it became a psychological injury or someone had put in a stress claim for workers' compensation. But when I entered in and I started off the business and I was very eager to get out and do prevention work, I went, there's no market for prevention. So that was a learning. Whereas today there is a massive market for prevention. It's been really interesting just to see the whole journey, the whole landscape change, the language that we use, the openness now that we are, even 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't even be having a podcast like this, right? That wouldn't have even existed in people having these conversations in the boardroom now. Reports are going to the board around the psychological health and wellbeing of employees and the population at work. So it's definitely very much been a changing landscape.
Very, very interesting. I was just thinking about what you said before. I can imagine even now some teams or managers, if you like, but especially in the 80s or 90s, that problem is not an issue for us because what we do is, to start with, we don't hire crazy people in their mind.
Correct.
And when there is a problem, we'll just get rid of it. And there's just, as opposed to thinking how you prevent it, thinking how you can live with these guys, thinking how you can best out of them, thinking that they could be the best you could ever hire. None of that would be even a discussion.
No, it wasn't a discussion. And I always have a little bit of a laugh at that, because if people ever talk about, can we screen out, for anyone with mental health issues, I say, you know what? In our workplace population, especially high performance cultures, prevalence rate is 1 in 3. 1 in 3 people within a 12-month period are likely to experience a mental health issue. So you're screening out half your population. So it's more around and the good news is that most mental health conditions that we see in the workplace are really as a result of someone going through a challenging time in their life. It is only a very small proportion they're not really pervasive, permanent conditions.
Mm.
And that was our mindset back then
Mhm.
was, oh, someone's going through a period of depression or a period of anxiety,
Mm.
and they might have this significant personal issue that might be going on. But we're viewing that through the lens of almost, it was permanent and pervasive, and we couldn't really do anything about it. Whereas what we know now is with great mental health frameworks and treatment options and lots of early intervention that we do these days, people can get back on track and actually fully recover.
Yeah.
And that was not in our mindset. We were very uneducated in our workplace
It's
back
interesting
then.
what you just said. I
in
just learned
the-
something from you there.
What was that?
Yeah, that definitely the stigma was part of the stigma was it's permanent. And you're saying now, absolutely not. People can go through a situation in their life and they might exhibit some of those symptoms, but they can completely recover.
Yes.
Can you summarize in your own words?
Yes, I always, absolutely. We have a whole arm of our business, which is called Resilia, and Resilia specialises in workplace recovery from workplace mental health and psychological injury issues.
Yeah.
And our whole team, we all have the belief that people can recover. And in fact, I would go on to say sometimes people are actually strengthened by that experience
Yes.
of going through a period of hardship or challenge or a challenging time either at work or outside of work.
Resilience?
And,
Could become resilient.
that's right. And then we can create people who are much higher on what we call adaptive resilience. So through the process of going through a time when they're a little bit unwell or their well-being is depleted or challenged, we're able to assist people out the other side so they're actually perhaps more robust, more psychologically aware, and they actually are very well equipped to implement the strategies to maintain their well-being, to maintain their wellness. Of course, there will always be some mental health conditions which are a little bit more permanent and a little bit more pervasive, but
Sure.
still, from our workplace lens, the majority of people, it's a small proportion where people are not able to make recoveries. So it's totally changed everyone's mindset now around this.
On average person, hardly 10% of people would know this fact that you just said.
Yes. So we've got to
That's
change
sad.
our mindset,
Yeah.
right? And yes, because that can lead to talent loss.
Yes.
You know, it's around all of us
Mm.
are vulnerable to experiencing a mental health issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any really discriminating factors. We can all be vulnerable given the right circumstances and the right mix of stressors that might come our way in life. So it's an interesting time where we have come so far, and as you were saying there as well, around the solution back then was, oh, this is too hard, we'll terminate. And that really was one of the only workplace strategies that people would use in the late 90s, early 2000s. As I was starting the business, I would hear that all the time because leaders did not have any broader range of skill set or education, awareness or knowledge to do anything different. So if I don't know what I don't know, it makes me feel comfortable. So the best way to reduce my discomfort is to get rid of the problem.
Yeah. I've had to unlearn a lot of that cowboyish style, especially someone that came into leadership through, as I mentioned before, just off the set, as an IT person, programmer. That industry was all new, hence the word cowboy. You know, it's the frontier. People just improvising. There was no rules and legislations yet in place. All those things, the legislations and rules and policies and stuff were behind. The industry was way ahead, was catching up. The governments and whatever were catching up because it was moving so fast, right? Hence the word cowboy I use anyway. I don't know why people use it, but I use it for that reason. So I've learned from those cowboys. That was, to me, those people I looked up to, and they were managers and leaders or good programmers when I was a young programmer, etc. But now I look back, they were cowboys. And I thought their behavior was correct. I had to unlearn all that. And this would be at least compared to the 80s and the 90s, it would be the most probably the least of all the problems, the sum of the behavior you've seen compared to the behavior towards someone with perceivably or, potential mental illness, their behavior towards that. I mean, in context back then probably was a tiny little bit understandable, but if you look in other areas how they behaved and stuff, oh my God. So that's the people I've learned from. Now I'm having to unlearn all that. I'm finding that really interesting. And I'm in a good place and all this, but it's really interesting when you look back. A lot of people like me, leaders who came into leadership positions, not because they went through 20 years of education and mentorship. They came into it because they're good at something. Their expertise, their technical expertise, put them or expedited their arrival into that leadership position, and they found themselves not equipped with any of that knowledge.
Yes.
So your education, not just for HR folks, 100% for leaders, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And that's what we see all the time, is that leaders are often promoted due to the technical excellence, and they are expert at what they do at their
Yes.
craft.
Yes.
However, now we know leadership
Yeah.
is a much broader
Yes.
repertoire,
Yes.
where now times have caught up, and now we do have legislation. We do have tighter controls and measures, and more than ever before, a positive duty on leaders to be responsible for their team's psychosocial risk profile. So that's a big shift
Yes.
from leaders being technical experts. They now have to be, they don't have to be, I always say to leaders, you don't have to be a psychologist or a mental health expert, but you do need to know how to care for your team. You do need to know how to support your team. You do need to know how those softer skills that are required to be a supportive leader.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. If you can help a tech team, you'll be able to help any company, because again, of that expectation of the fast, the crazy speed, and it's still a bit of a cowboyish culture, because you look at some movies and still a little bit as heroic or acceptable for people to prioritize success and fast growth over bulldozer a lot of things, and sort of you show that in comedies or movies and people laugh about it, they think it's okay. So if you can work with those kind of teams and fix them, you'll be able to fix any other industry almost.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Very
think
interesting.
That's a good point around probably the mindset that we did see back in the late 90s, early 2000s, was I'm working at the expense of my well-being, or I'm working at the neglect of my well-being.
Yeah.
It was something that we didn't consider, and leaders certainly weren't considering that for their teams, because our world was set up a little bit differently then, where we didn't have technology at home and devices, and we could switch off and we could do lots of things. Whereas now our mindset has to be different, because we know if we have that mindset, we're probably not going to last the distance. So now it's around, well, how do I work by prioritizing my well-being? So it's a different it's a different equation now that we're looking at a different mindset.
Rachel, in high-performing tech companies, it's still a bit of a brag, and people think it's amazing when people talk about, I've done 70 hours this week, or I've slept 4 hours. Oh, what a hero. Still going on V's and coffees and whatever. 4 hours sleep, 2 hours sleep. Wow, what a hero. It's still that culture acceptable now. It's changed a lot. As we speak, this is happening still. Been people talking about it and thinking it's okay and whatever. Interesting. We'll come back to those
like
details.
Bragging rights.
Sorry?
It was almost like the bragging rights.
Yes.
And that meant I was a high performer.
Yes.
That I'm working hard, I'm pulling an all-nighter.
Yes.
I've worked with many professions where that was worn as a badge of honour.
Yes.
Whereas now, with today's wellbeing lens over everything that we do, we might look at that and say, that's a psychological risk factor.
Yes.
Now, as a leader, I need to manage that, because that's not going to be sustainable now. So, we've come a long way since those days.
I'm going to talk about that. This is so interesting. But I just want to, again, let the audience understand a little bit about what you do. What are the typical problems that corporate and companies come to you to help them with?
It could be any psychosocial risk that has the potential to impact on the psychological well-being or mental health of a team or an organisation. So it could be, and we go across 3 arms of wellbeing: prevention, intervention and recovery. So, for example, our prevention team we have a firm belief in that division that if we can get in there, we can prevent psychological harm. We can help organisations to have mentally healthy teams so we can have high performance, we can do a great job, we can serve our customers and our clients, but without having the psychological harm
Yep.
of our employees along the way. So our prevention team, they might go in and even now doing some what we call psychosocial risk audits, where we go into organisations and we help them to identify their psychological risk profile or their psychosocial risk
Yep.
profile. So we would look at what are the main things that might be impacting on your team's or your organisation's wellbeing. How is that benchmarked against best practice? Let's do a gap analysis and help you to identify what those gaps may be, and we may prioritise. This may help with your strategic planning for the next 12 months to 2 years. Here's our top psychosocial risks that we need to really get very good at managing and mitigating. Let's put some controls and measures in place. So it could be doing that type of assessment work. Sometimes we go in the back end of that and we do some of the organisational development off the back of that as well. We may have possibly made some recommendations which we may then carry out, but we also in that prevention team do a lot of capability uplift, a lot of education for HR professionals, leaders around whatever element they might be wanting to improve. So recently we worked with an organisation that where bullying and harassment was a big theme, and that was having a significant psychological impact on people. So we ran all of their leaders and HR professionals through a very practical Respect at Work program where we gave them really practical skills to be a good bystander, to recognise when someone's crossed the line, to be able to have challenging conversations in that space. It could be we may have an organisation that's got a lot of vicarious trauma exposure. We do a lot of work with the legal profession. We do a lot of work in media.
Legal professions? Why that in
Yes.
particular? Can you elaborate a little bit? Because
Or their exposure
I hang out with
to
lawyers all the time. I
Oh,
spend
do
2
you?
hours a
Yes.
day probably with lawyers. So yeah,
with the legal profession and their relationship with vicarious trauma, a lot of the lawyers that we work with, the firms or the organisations may have teams that are exposed to a lot of very distressing material. It could
why
be
do you
they
think
may be on
that's
a.
a proportion that? Why do you think from what?
I think it's the
Why
nature
is
of
that?
the
Is the risk
work.
associated with that
Oh, why?
coming
Oh,
from?
there's been so many studies done to show that the legal profession has probably is the most challenged with respect to mental health and well-being.
Why?
They have the highest rates of one of the highest rates of depression and anxiety. I think the work they do is some very unique psychosocial risk factors in it. The work demands, the work pressures, the perhaps challenging clients, the performance pressure, the billable hours, the
Not pertaining to the topics they are dealing with. I just want to
sometimes it
differentiate. Is it that, or is it
It
just
could
the
be that
standards in
too.
which they expect them to do 10, 15 hours and staying back to research? Or is it that,
Yes.
or is it the topics they deal with, the fact that they are contributing to someone going away for all
Yes.
their life, or someone losing all their company, etc.,
Yes.
or is it both?
It could be both. Yeah, very much. Sometimes we work with lawyers that do not have the high emotional demands, but it's the workload, work pressure, or work uh, load aspect,
Yep.
really. Or we work with lawyers that have that plus the emotional demands. Maybe I'm on a Royal Commission for 2 years and I'm reading very distressing, traumatic material.
Okay.
Or maybe I work in insurance and I'm viewing a lot of distressing material around
Sure.
personal injury and personal injury
People
claims.
losing their house or whatever, and I've helped the
Yes,
insurance company to make that work,
that's
and I'll
right.
feel maybe bad about it or
Or
conflicted about it.
family lawyers, criminal lawyers, all sorts of different types of law where people get exposed to very traumatic
Yeah,
content.
yeah.
So that's why we do a lot of work in the vicarious
it.
trauma space
Yeah.
with other professions as well,
Yeah.
but law firms a lot as and really looking at, well, how do we, if that's a psychosocial risk, how do we skill people up
Yeah.
and train people up
Okay.
so as that I am very aware if I'm a leader, I am more capable of managing a team who are exposed to that
Mm.
load and what I need to do as a leader
Yeah.
to reduce that risk. Or if I'm an individual and I'm working with those cases, it matters what am I doing as an individual? What's my personal responsibility to make sure I'm actually looking after myself
Yeah.
or voicing any concerns very proactively and early. We do a lot of work educating around mental health and wellbeing. So it can be a whole variety of things in the prevention team. In the early intervention team, we have a big team, and our whole mindset in that team is if we can get in early, we can absolutely stop a little problem from becoming a big one. So early intervention counselling services. So people, most organisations, no matter how large or small they may be, it is best practice now to have an employee assistance program. So a counselling service, confidential counselling service that your staff can use at those very early stages
Yep.
of I'm not tracking so well. I'm going to get some early assistance, short-term,
Mm.
solution-focused counselling, and be able to get back on track quite quickly. We do a lot of trauma support, on-site assistance as well. It could be a variety of
So
different
employee
coaching.
surveys can help with that to get the
Employee
sentiment
surveys.
early enough.
That's right. Yes. Anything where we can
Because
track
that's
those
confidential.
trends. Very confidential.
Surveys by its nature, you can't see who said what.
That's correct. That's right. And that can give us very useful data on how employees, what their experience may be around their employee engagement or health and wellbeing services. And then we also do a lot of work on recovery aspect. So we have a team, Resilia, that goes out and helps people to recover when they've gone through a really challenging time in their life and need a little bit more robust assistance and
Okay.
support. So we always say we're an organisation's one-stop shop with respect to wellbeing services because you don't know necessarily where your employees may be. You can have some in the early intervention, some
Yep.
needing a bit of recovery, or others, how do we maintain
Yep.
the wellness of our
Yep.
organisation?
Yep. Still warming up. So we're still in that leading to the half an hour sort of mark, which is the warm up, the end of the warm up period.
Okay.
Last question in that area is for people to really know you as well and where your passion is as a professional. I'm going to ask the question this way. If you have a $20 million, 20 million Australian dollars to spend on a project, research project that will help you and the industry and the world to learn something new in your field, what would that be? What would that project be about?
Interesting question.
$20 million, you can have about
Yes, that's
50
right.
people working for you for 3 years full time in this
Yeah.
country. That's
Yeah.
a decent amount of money.
That's a very
What would you do with
huge
it?
amount of research money. I would probably, what we have seen in the last 20 or so years is certainly a little bit of a decline in that skill, that competence of adaptive resilience. So we spend
Adaptive resilience.
adaptive resilience. So our world of work has changed tremendously since I started the business 25 years ago. We are now living in that VUCA world. It's very volatile.
In that world?
The VUCA world. The VUCA world. So the VUCA world is stands for volatile, unpredictable, complex,
Yes.
and ambiguous.
I'm impressed you remembered the
So
letters.
this was, I love
Okay.
this story about the VUCA world.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Sorry.
It was a term that was coined in 1985
Oh,
to describe a once-in-a-decade event like a earthquake or a stock market crash.
okay.
Something so significant
Yeah.
that it had the ability to rock the foundations of your psychological
Yes.
well-being. But
Yeah.
guess what? It was only a once-in-a-decade event. So what we have seen now is that the world of work has been fast-tracked, sped up. We are doing so much more these days, and our world is very different. So this VUCA world now, we're living with permanent, pervasive states of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity.
Mm.
So this is not a once-in-a-decade event now. This is our BAU. So the VUCA world is it actually goes against our body's natural psychology. We thrive a lot better. Our body's natural psychology operates a lot better in states where there's control, where there's comfort, where there's a degree of
Okay.
confidence and
Predictability.
competence. I love the 4 Cs where psychologically that strengthens us. The VUCA world, if we're not careful, has the potential to erode our well-being because it's a little opposite to how we actually
So evolutionarily
prefer to
speaking, we
Yes.
don't like to be in those situations.
Yes.
We like to be in a safe zone, in
Yes.
something we're more predictable, we understand really well.
Yes.
Change
Yes.
can have an impact on our brain power and psychological well-being, yeah?
Yes, change has
How
a
to deal with that.
massive, that whole transition aspect of change, huge. So the VUCA world, BAU now. So this is a very different way of living and working. So, what we've seen people really struggle with mental health and well-being and states of burnout and well-being depletion over the last 20 or so years. Often, I think, because that adaptive resilience, we're not setting people up for success in the VUCA world. So, we do a lot of work with graduates, and what I see is that they come out, they are technically great and very intelligent and smart, but certainly lack those skills, lack those psychological or the mental fitness skills
Mm.
to be able to
Mental
thrive
fitness.
in a VUCA world.
I've heard that word a zillion times. This is the first time now, because of what you're saying, that it means something to me. The fitness, as in just like our physical
Yes.
fitness, it because you've been exercising it, it has
Yes.
the ability to perform and be more flexible and whatever.
Yes.
How interesting.
Yes. So that agility of mind, our ability to reframe, our ability to look after ourselves. These are the competencies, the well-being competencies that are required in the VUCA world. Yet we're not necessarily setting people up for success when they're coming into the workforce. So if it was an ideal world and I had all of that money to spend on research,
Yep.
I would be going back into schools and actually starting at the grassroots level and helping people to have these skills to build that adaptive resilience so that when I come out, I'm able to adapt and cope and manage that world, because it's very different now to how it was.
So you would invest to create the right programs
Yes.
and how you roll them out schools,
Yes.
programs that you know would work and be easily to be rolled out and
Yes,
etc.
that's right.
For so at early age before problems are too hard to fix, you create the
right.
resilience so they never occur.
Well, yes, that's right, to maybe limit. I'm sure that they would still occur
Sure,
because life
sure.
happens and life can be overwhelming at times and
Mm.
challenging. But maybe we can actually allow people a stronger platform, a stronger foundation
That
to be able
resilience
to,
thing.
yeah, that's right, to be able to manage in the VUCA world.
We talked about this so many times. This is so true.
Because
I
otherwise,
remember.
that's why people spend 5 years in therapy,
Yeah.
trying to learn all the things that they could have
Yeah.
learnt in high school but never did,
Yeah.
when we were growing up.
Yeah. It's so many, like, oh my gosh, now it came back to me. Picked up this book probably about 10 years ago. About the mind, the difference between the mind and the pure you. What do you call that? Science or art or old philosophy or whatever. The mindfulness,
Yes.
right? So I picked up the book and I got to understand the concept of mindfulness. And I was saying to people, why don't we teach kids at school this stuff? You know? Why do we wait until they have so many problems and they're struggling to deal with life as opposed to give them those skills? Yeah, that's that moment.
Yes,
You're talking about the
that's
same thing.
right. Yes, so mindfulness is part of that. And really, I mean, school now is very different as well. So school to how that was when I was growing up. Some of these skills are being taught. Some
Yeah.
of them are being taught, definitely. But just that ability to be mentally fit, I think that there's a little bit of work there that could be done to set people up for success. So I might have a whole handful of skills in my toolbox to be able to draw out at different times when I'm entering into the workforce, and it is challenging and I will fail and I am going to get difficult feedback from time to time, or I am going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
How do I actually be in that world, and things will change and things will be disappointing, or how do I actually allow myself to flourish in those environments?
My son is 20. One of the funny moments that he reminds me about when he was in primary school is him and his friends, they kind of pretend they put on to pretend that they are doing the yoga thing. So they're doing this yoga thing and they're 5, 6, 7 or something, and they're doing it, pretending they're actually really concentrating. He does it to remind me of that because I remember watching him once and I was cracking up how half the class just doing it and the teacher had no idea that no one's really actually doing it properly or focusing. She was not really into it herself. She couldn't really get them into it. So
That's
it's
funny.
interesting.
Yeah.
Some schools maybe started to pay some attention to that already.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting. I'm really surprised you said that, pleasantly surprised. I am so in agreement with you.
Well, when we are assisting people in our work, when they've gone through a period of hardship and we're assisting them to get their mental health and their well-being on track. We offer a coaching program which has the modules and foundations of adaptive resilience. So we're teaching it to adults. But I'm like, wow, wouldn't this be amazing if you could get this training program or this coaching program to be run very early on,
Yeah.
so that where people are just much more equipped.
Yeah. What's his name? This guy who from I can't remember the country, somewhere in Northern Europe, pretty cold, Sweden or one of those, who's been around for the last 15 years, been big, in the mainstream media and everywhere. He takes people into classes and gets them to go into the cold, into freezing cold and whatever.
Winhoff.
Right, this guy.
Yes.
What do you know about him, and do you think there's something to what he's doing? And do you agree with anything or at least the concept of what he's trying to do there? And
Yeah. I mean, the Winhoff method, from what I know about I've tried it a couple of times, but it's made me really dizzy. So I haven't been able to do the right breathing rate. But I presume what is happening through that breathing is putting people into that relaxed, almost meditative state, so that you can take a cold plunge. It invigorates your autonomic kind of arousal system. It can help you with your rest and digest system as well. So all that parasympathetic nervous system. So it can help you put you into altered states so you can tolerate.
so is it bringing you
cold.
into the moment? Is that part of the mindfulness when
Part
you're
of it
when you're
is.
dealing with something so dangerous, you seem to be focused on that and nothing else. You're in the moment. Gives you that break. Is that
Yeah.
the idea?
Part of it is bringing you into the moment, and you're in that almost meditative state, so that you can do things like go in a -25 plunge in the snow, and go for a hike in -20 with your shorts and your t-shirt on. So you are almost immune to the noise, to the feelings and the other sensations that are going on, and you can tolerate things. So I
Okay.
think the Winhoff can definitely help to improve your resilience, but makes me very dizzy.
Okay, okay, very interesting. Because he is using it now in the context of helping corporates and stuff. A bunch of
Yes.
execs could go there on a bonding kind of thing, but also trying to learn from it or whatever.
Yes.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. I would love to ask you now about the topic that we want to. So that's now we've done the entree. Now we're in the main meal.
Okay.
High performing team in a tech environment. Let's just be very specific to make it quite practical for people. Just like ours, company like ours, Martian Logic, we're a tech company, software tech company. I'm a shareholder. My shareholders, the board, which are sort of shareholders, we want high performance team. I'm just trying to process that why. We know that we want it. I've never actually asked the question why. I think there's a bit of a thing with the tech world that if you don't grow fast enough, you're going to die. There's always that rush to be able to grow. But also shareholders want their return.
Their return,
When you look at a
yes.
valuation of a company, the growth rate impacts the valuation of the company. So not just how much money you have now, how quickly you got there makes a big difference, yeah?
Yes.
So maybe that's why they might not, maybe, I think it is. It's grow. What's the rate of the growth, in other words, yeah? So
pressure.
that can really, if that is not filtered from the board and the leadership, if not filtered properly down, it can be harmful because it could set pressure on people, create chaos.
That's right.
Right? Cool. Nevertheless, if we go back to really what I want to ask here, main topic is, can the two things coexist? High performing teams and very, very good mental health environment. A place that you can have people with mental health and they can thrive and be happy and they can find that is home, and I want to work in this company. They choose to be working here, yet this company is still a high performance company. Can the two things coexist?
I think with the right management styles, the right leadership, the right measures and controls in place, yes, it can. And I like what you qualified there, because a lot of individuals who are very high performing do experience mental health challenges. As I said, 1 in 3 people. So it's very, very high. So it's not around the absence of poor mental health. It's really around, well, how do we support
Yeah.
mental health and well-being? And yeah, I mean, it is such a driving imperative now in today's world where good staff retention is challenging, where
Yes.
wages are kind of leveling out a little bit
Yep.
now. One of the biggest factors is actually that people are looking for now is 93% of Australians are saying that their psychological health is just as important now, perhaps even slightly more important than their remuneration. So choosing an organisation that is mindful of that, that has an attractive employee value proposition around employee wellbeing, is what actually is now one of the biggest differentiators between high performance cultures and those that are not as high performance. And that helps the staff retention, that's attracting people. So it's an interesting time now where people are prioritizing their mental health, their flexibility for work is a
Mm-hmm.
huge one at the moment as
Mm-hmm.
well, because we know that the significant gains in performance productivity from having a team that is psychologically
Okay,
healthy.
let's dig into
significant.
this. This is amazing start to the conversation. So I interviewed Dr. Amanda Ferguson, who is an organizational psychologist. And I said, is there a word to describe the opposite of micromanagement? She said something to me that was new to me at the time, but it took me a while and eventually I understood what she's talking about. She called it nuanced. And I go, oh, nuanced? Basically, I think, I don't want to speak for her, but you probably understand the topic better than me by any means. I think I understood she's saying to have that conversation with the individual, understand what they care about, and create an environment that works for them. Do you think this would be, I mean, first of all, I would love for you to comment if you know that thing, that nuance, if that's really what it means. But, and if it does, is that really very relevant to what you're saying here? If how we can make it work, we have someone who's brilliant, but they've got mental health, how we can make it a win-win. It's
Yeah.
that nuance, creating
Yeah.
that environment, that, that custom, if you like, environment for that person so they can thrive.
That's right. Yes. I mean, it's very much around getting to know your teams as individuals, getting to know them a little bit at work and a little bit outside of work.
Yes.
It's definitely about that's part of forming the trust account.
Yes.
People want more and more their leader to care for them, their leader to have empathy for them, their leader to listen to them, to build a little bit of that personal relationship. And part of the skill in being a leader now is to have conversations around, tell me what helps you to be able to perform at your best. What is it that I can do to help you perform at your
Got it.
best?
And
And
hence that
also
custom
that
thing, hence that
nuanced.
nuance. You're
Yes.
absolutely right.
Because everyone is different. Even in our team, if we had kind of a blanket rule for flexibility, that's not going to work for everybody. We have people in our team that say, right at the moment in my life, working from home a little bit more than coming into the office is more important for me than remuneration.
Yes.
Because I've got young children
Yes.
and I really want that freedom and that flexibility, and that's when I perform at my best. I can be there a little bit for the family and a little bit and very much do my job and perform my job
Yep.
well. We've got others who might be a lot younger and say, I want to come into the office all the time. So my needs for flexibility are completely different
Yep.
because I've got more social needs and I want to build more relationships with my colleagues and I want to go out. And so it's really that nuanced style that you're talking about. It's almost it's about leaders having those skills to be able to engage in those almost coaching conversations with people around how can I support you, or what do you need from me to be able to help you to perform at your best. And if people are in a psychologically safe culture, that's what it depends on. Because you can ask me that question, but if I don't feel as if it's psychologically safe for me to say, actually, you know what,
Psychologically
I would
safe.
benefit.
Do you know how I would describe it? Mature enough. Company has got the maturity to realize we have to be able to work with those people. Those people are part of our society. They are 1 out of 3. Some of them are the most brilliant people in the world. We have to be able to work with them. We have to have those nuances, those flexibilities. They are part of our community. That's
Yes.
how our community is made. We are a community. It can't be a community of freaks. It needs to be a representation of society.
Yes, that's
So
right.
that's maturity, isn't it?
That's right. And it's not just for people who may have had or may experience a mental health issue. This is about for everyone. How do we all perform at our best, and how do I have my work life so that that helps me to perform at my best? And that means, and we're talking before around even neurodiversity, and just around the prevalence rate for neurodiversity. We're getting better at diagnosing people.
Neurodiversity, is that a new term? How long has
Yes.
it been used around?
It's been used around for a while, but we've got a lot clearer.
Sure.
Our workplace has probably been very much set up for more of a neurotypical world.
Sure.
So what we know now is around with diagnoses, people getting much more comfortable in talking about neurodiversity diagnoses and conditions. We're seeing now probably around 1 in 10 people who may be diagnosed as being neurodiverse.
Yep.
So those conversations really help someone who's neurodiverse as well around what are the things that you need? How can we set up work to help you to perform at your best?
So I've learned something from you. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all
It's
right.
interesting when you're talking about the trust. You used the word trust when you were talking about getting to know the person. Build that trust account, you said.
Yes.
So interesting. You helped me connect the dots, and please confirm that for me. So when you're trying to build a trust, okay, because I go back to my question when I said, what's the opposite of micro? I think I've asked that to another HR person, they said trust-based, right? And in my mind, trust-based, I'm thinking, initially I had thought a trust meaning I'm going to trust you that you can take care of that project, give you some room, as opposed to being always coming back every 5 minutes, that sort of helicopter parenting kind of thing, always making sure you're okay. Even if it's coming from a good place, I want to help you. Give them some space, some room. Let them make some mistakes and muck around a little bit, yeah? And I'm thinking that kind of trust space, I'll trust you with. But I think what you just said helped me to understand also that this trust will be even further improved and more maybe hopeful is if it's trust based on getting to know that person, about their life and stuff. You sort of seem to becomes like almost a friend. I mean, they're very different from being a friend. You're
Yes.
still the boss
Yes.
for that person. But I think it creates, it reduces anxiety a lot.
Yes. If you are more human at work,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Around how do we create, environments that are more human? Because that's what, when you look at the research also, well, what do people want from their leader? It's around, I want my leader to care for me. I want my leader to listen to me and understand things. I want my leader to have empathy, concern for me as a human.
Yeah.
And when we bring that humanness back into the workplace, that is what often builds that psychological safety. And when I talk about the trust account, I just think of it in very simple terms. It's about leaders just knowing some of those micro skills to be able to put the emotional deposits in the bank account for people on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So if I've got a team, what am I doing consciously, intentionally, and effortfully to be able to put those little emotional deposits into the emotional bank account?
This
Because
trust base is so interesting.
yes. Well, if it makes sense when you think of it the other way, if I'm a leader and I'm constantly making withdrawals from the emotional bank account, but I'm not in credit, in fact, I'm in deficit and maybe I'm running on bankrupt now,
Okay.
and all I'm doing is making withdrawals
Yeah.
all the time, asking you to do
Yeah.
things, giving you negative feedback or whatever, I'm not putting anything in, suddenly I'm going to be running on empty.
Absolutely agree, but there's a slightly different angle to this as well. I would love your feedback on. So this is my own interpretation. You're the expert here. If you think about the old term of walking on eggshells, okay? So that's if you think about the employee, if they ever felt that they walk on eggshell, in the sense they're saying, if I make any mistake, I'm going to be hammered for it by
Yes.
my boss. My boss
Yes.
is watching me, and so that is a great deal of anxiety. That's certainly,
yes.
you're not going to call that environment a mentally safe space.
That's
or
right.
What did you call that?
Psychologically safe.
Thank you, thank you. So
Yes.
certainly that's the opposite, if anything, right?
Correct.
Let's at least say it's anxiety, creating anxiety. Okay. If you get to, I'm going back to that trust, which is thanks to you, you triggered that in my mind and I can't stop thinking about it. You said it makes you more human. If this person realizes that you as the boss, yes, you are strict because you've got a business to run, etc., or part of the business to run, no matter who that boss is in terms of where in the business. But they get to know you as a human, that you are a decent person. That means that it's going to be a less anxiety, because at a minimum, put it this way, because they're going to realize, because you're a good person, but at the same time, you're a professional, you've got you've got standards to prove to the business, things to get done, etc. You've got expectation. At least they will know, as long as my heart in the right place, if I make mistake, this is a good guy, I will never be punished for it.
Yes.
In itself is going to reduce the anxiety
Yes.
so much.
That's correct. So, as an example of that, I'll share this example of someone close to me had this experience when he was starting out in his consulting career, high performance firm that he was working with. He was responsible for the team had been working on this tender, a very long, very arduous tender, and he'd been working on it because he was junior. He was tasked with running it down to the organisation.
Yeah.
So it was before you even put tenders in mails or email. He certainly didn't email. So he had to physically run it down.
Yeah.
And he got there, and you know how strict the tender processes are.
Sure.
If you're there 5 minutes late, it's out. He had made an error on the time that the tender was due. So he'd run it down at 5 o'clock, and it was actually due at 4 o'clock.
Ooh.
So he was an hour late. The team had worked, this huge team. He had partners, he had senior leaders.
And they missed the opportunity.
And they missed the opportunity because he had misread the tender doc.
Yep.
He had run it down at the wrong time. And I'll always remember this. His leader was very psychologically safe, and he had to go back to the leader, and he felt terrible and explain what had happened. And you know what the leader said? The leader said, well, we weren't meant to get that. We weren't meant to win that tender. That was not the right client for us, was it?
How nice and
I
kind
thought,
is that?
how amazing is that? That's probably a rare response, but he remembers that to this very day. That's what his leader said to him. If I have a leader that's going to become emotionally dysregulated when I say, hey, I'm really sorry, I made a terrible mistake, I've missed the tender time. If I have a leader that I know is going to become very dysregulated, maybe, blaming and pointing the finger and all of those sorts of things, that creates that, it's not so psychologically safe. And that's where mental health issues exacerbate. That's where they start. That's where the breeding ground exists. And also, the risk is if I make a mistake, I'm not going to tell you about it because it's not psychologically safe. When you're looking at the world of human factors where humans have made errors, like whether it's in avionics or in industrial or workplace accidents, very often it boils down to low psychological safety. People say, I knew that was faulty. I knew there was a problem with that. But I thought I was going to get psychologically berated. Psychologically, it was not safe for me to come forward. So then this terrible accident happens, and that's often what is a disaster waiting to happen, whether it's a psychological disaster or a physical disaster in some cases. But it really boils down to psychological safety. And they've done some, Amy Edmondson, if anyone's keen to look at her research, she's Amy Edmondson. She's the kind of guru in psychological safety. And lots of studies have been done to look at what is the differentiator of high performance teams. And they did a particular very long study of teams at Google. So they studied what are the highest performing teams that we have at Google and the lowest performing teams that we have at Google. And they looked into this and they measured lots of different variables. Was it teams that had lunch together versus those that didn't? Was it teams that had a bunch of extroverts versus introverts? Was it a team that started off their meetings with a social catch-up and then went on to task-related discussions? What was it about the composition of the teams? And they did this incredible in-depth research. Didn't find much the first time round. Second time round, continued the research and found that the biggest differentiator was psychological safety.
I was going to say that as I'm listening to you, I'm learning, I'm processing, I'm going, it has to be that.
Because psychologically
You
safe
feel
teams,
safe
they
to
found,
make mistakes, to be creative, to be you, to try things outside of the box, even if it's good. Because that's when they talk about you've got to encourage people making errors. I said, well, it's the same thing. If you think you're going to be punished for making an error, I mean, it's really saying it differently.
Yes.
Just different ways of explaining it, isn't it?
That's right. And you're exactly right. It's around if I'm in a psychologically safe team, it's safe for me to call out a creative idea that no one's ever thought of.
Yeah.
If it's safe for me to say, I can call out some inappropriate behaviour. I can say to my boss, hey, I'm not travelling so well today. I've got some challenges going on. Can I have a chat to you about it? It's psychologically safe for me to admit an error. It's psychologically safe for me to put up my hand and say, "Hey, I need some
Yeah.
help. I'm don't have a clue what I'm doing here." It's psychologically safe for me to say, "Hey, I've got some capacity." So psychological safety covers a whole range
Yes.
of things. But when we look at it through the lens of mental health and well-being, it means I don't have to positively impression manage.
Yes.
The amount of energy that goes into people covering up, masking and hiding a mental health issue or a well-being challenge is enormous. Just to be able to fit in to a high-performance environment.
It takes up a lot of your energy
Oh,
that you could be using it to actually do your job.
yes,
Oh my
that's
God, I
right.
never thought about it
You're
like
so
that.
psychologically distracted, and they've done studies on this to show that when people are in a psychologically safe environment where they don't have to impression manage, their work
I'm sorry,
performance
you
is
used that.
incredible.
Can you say that? That's such an awesome term. Impression manage.
Yes, when they don't have to positively impression manage, so they don't have to pretend I'm
Yes.
great when I'm not.
Never heard of that term before. It's so brilliant.
Oh, well, there's a
Yeah.
lot of psychological energy that goes into people.
When they're impression managing
Impression manage. If
their
I've
way
got
through the
depression
company.
or anxiety
Yeah.
or whatever it is going on behind the scenes, I can cover that up. So I'm going to
Yeah.
manage that. So wherever you see me, I might be laughing, I might
Yeah.
be chatting, I
Oh
might look like I've
my
got it all together,
God.
but underneath I'm paddling like mad to stay
That would be the
afloat.
saddest thing for
Yeah.
people to think that, to feel that they have to do that.
And we see that a lot. And then the studies that have been done on this have shown just incredible performance gains. If I don't have to impression manage, I
You've,
have energy for my job. I
you've
have
just,
energy for others. I have energy to get better.
you just, you just killed it in terms of this topic that I thought was complicated. You've made it so simple, the answer.
That's good. I'm glad.
What? 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 I thought that was going to be a 5-hour conversation. You're saying this is something that we do all the time.
Yes.
By any means, I'm not saying we're practice it properly or we're doing a good job at doing it, but we certainly intend to. For the last 10 years, we say you've got to be able to feel comfortable to say what you're good at and what you suck at.
Yes.
And to say, yep, that was my mistake. Yep, I've made that
That's
stuff
right.
up.
That's right.
And sometimes life happens and our lack of management skills happens and we don't know that we're creating an environment that becomes where people aren't able to do that, but we don't realize that. We still think because we said you should be able to do that, you're doing it, but we
Yes.
create an environment where it's not doable. I mean, everybody's is liable to that. Any of us as a manager can fall into that without realizing. So it's not the end of the world, but
Yes.
certainly we know, I know in my heart, because I was a developer, if you don't have the environment, a tech person, a creative person will not be able to thrive if they're not in such an environment, if they're not
Yes.
working within that environment.
Yes.
And now you're saying, so I knew that part,
Yes.
but I had no idea what would be the number one priority or number one, priority, let's say, for a manager or for a team in terms of what to do to be able to bring the best into a mental health person. And you're saying give them that psychologically safe environment
Yes.
where they feel they don't need to, what did you call it? Something managed?
Positively impression manage.
Positively impression manage, which takes so much psychological cost
Exactly.
and time they could be working, and creates anxiety, and it goes into loops, anxiety and mental work, both feed off each other.
It's a load. It's a load on the prefrontal cortex. It's
Yeah.
a huge emotional load.
So you create that environment from the very beginning, from the interview process to the first meeting to how you introduce people to. Give me. You must be asked by clients before, say, what kind of exercise or team bonding or a video I can create or whatever to show people to really demonstrate that you are okay to say I've stuffed this up.
Mm.
You must have
Yes.
been asked that before.
Yes, I mean we run training for leaders because this is around psychological safety just doesn't exist. You actually have to work at creating it.
Yes.
It's not just going to happen. A leader actually has to work to create and build that psychological safety. Psychological safety is something that takes some time to be able to build up, but it can be lost in an instant if you or a leader or a team member, but particularly leader, because leader behavior speaks 10 times louder than anybody else's behavior.
Yes.
If we act or behave in a way that is not psychologically safe, I can destroy all psychological safety that was built up over the last 2 years. I can destroy in 1 second by making a judgment, by saying an off comment, by laughing at something that's not
Yes.
appropriate,
Yep.
it's inappropriate,
Yep.
by not being understanding. If someone has the courage and the confidence to
Yep.
say, hey, I'm not doing so well, can I chat to you about it? So it's I think it's not too hard to build, but it's good management practices really. And it goes back to the trust account. It goes back to actually leaders. What are the things that they do to build that
This
trust
is
account?
really
And
interesting.
I call them micro affirmations.
Rachel, this is really interesting. And, again, I'm not exactly an expert at the topic. So maybe if I'm finding something interesting, maybe it's not that interesting for someone. But I'm finding what I'm learning from you is really interesting. That whole connection between the trust and between reducing the anxiety. Reducing the anxiety between the manager towards their boss. Yeah? Reducing the anxiety by building that trust. How can it not be that clear in my mind? It's never been clearer. It's so interesting, and how it also impacts on a big part of that psychological safety. I'm sorry, what's the word? Psychological safe environment?
Yeah,
Yeah.
psychological
Yeah.
safety.
They are interconnected. Can you speak to that?
Well, it's an interesting point around what you're saying there around it seems so simple, yet when people are surveyed around is my workplace psychologically safe? I define it as is my workplace psychologically safe for me to bring my whole self to work?
Yeah.
And
is that right or wrong?
Well, yeah, it's great if my workplace is psychologically safe for me to bring
What
my
does
whole
it mean,
work.
bringing my whole self?
That
Is that what you mean? So I don't have to hide?
That's right. So that could mean, hey, my whole self might be, I'm not feeling so great psychologically today. I've got a personal issue going on in the background. My workload's too big and I can't manage it. I am really stuck. I've got no idea what I'm doing on this particular job. I'm a new graduate.
So just to explain it to
Right.
people, to me and
Yes.
to people, bring the whole self as opposed to masking certain
That's
things.
right.
And that's that thing you're talking about, the image
The positive
managing.
impression management. Yeah.
Right.
You like that word.
Love it. I've
The
learned 5
positive-
words from you already.
The positive impression
Yeah.
management, and in the surveys in Australian workplaces, it's still saying probably about 50% of people are saying my workplace is not psychologically safe. So they sound simple, right? It sounds simple to be able for leaders, and leaders have the biggest influence over their psychologically safe
Yeah.
teams. They are the biggest predictive factor of psychological safety is how leaders think and behave and their attitudes and their values. And I just because I like to make things very simple around it's about those micro affirmations. An individual's That's
Affirmations.
another new word.
Yeah.
There you go. That's
Yeah. You don't realise you're doing these breadcrumbs every 2 minutes. There's a word. Lost count.
It is a little bit. I think
Yeah.
micro affirmations are a little bit like breadcrumbs in a way.
Yeah.
In that leadership behaviour is often the biggest impact of leadership behaviour is the smallest things that you do every single day that you might not even think.
I'm sorry, repeat
are
this.
That important.
That sounded very powerful. Say it again.
Oh, the biggest contribution to leadership is about the smallest things that you do as a leader every day.
Interesting. Biggest contribution, the smallest thing that you do.
Yeah.
Example?
The smallest little micro behaviors. So in the literature, they're called micro affirmations. It's simple things. It could be going up to a team member and say, hey, how was your weekend? And really standing by and listening to it. It could be remembering something important about somebody and asking them about it later. Hey, I remembered you were going to see that concert last week. How was that? How'd that go? I know it was your son's soccer grand final on the weekend. How was that? How did that go? It could be I'm giving you a lot of gratitude or praise. There's a job well done. Let's celebrate your success. I want to acknowledge that. I might go out of my way to just go and get to know you and go out for a coffee catch up because I don't know you very well. Maybe you're new in my team. Maybe it's a little mentoring career chat with somebody. Maybe it's a little social event.
That is amazing.
It could be writing an email to
That's
a team
the small thing.
to
A
acknowledge
question
things.
and have a minute of your time to be really listening to what they said. Such a small thing.
Small thing. And that is the thing, because leaders, I think, underestimate the powerful impact that their behavior has on someone's mental health and well-being, either in a positive direction. If it's great, I can be the biggest protective factor. I can be protective in my leadership style, or I can be an exacerbator of someone's distress if I'm using what we call micro inequities. They're the opposite to micro affirmations.
Explain that one. I know it's the opposite, but give me the example or something. Micro inequity.
Micro inequities. So that is, it might not be my intention to detract from your psychological well-being, to take a little deposits out of that well-being bucket, but through my behavior, I am eroding your well-being. It could be I'm sending emails at midnight. I might not be expecting you to reply, but the fact is I've got a junior who's getting out of bed and responding to those emails. It could be I'm very task focused in my leadership style. So I'm just so under the pump myself. I'm just coming in. I don't have time to say good morning, goodbye, how's your day, how are you going? Maybe the only time I ever hear from my leader is if I'm getting negative feedback. Maybe I never hear, and this is very common. I was on a call with a client the other day.
Is?
Yeah, the inequity.
The word inequity is being more on the what I want side or whatever. Sorry, explain the inequity.
Yes.
What does it mean? Where did it come from in this context here?
Yeah, I think it's
the meaning in this
certainly
context?
around it's out of balance. It's
Okay.
inequitable.
Sure. I get
So
that, but the micro inequity.
they're small things. They're so tiny. It
Not doing enough in that area. Is that what the
Yes,
inequity?
yes.
Okay.
So it could be so simple. Like years ago, in one of my first jobs, I was in a workplace, and this is a simple one. No one said good morning, and no one said goodbye, and
Yeah.
no one would say, how was your day?
Yeah.
And I just thought, I think back to that time now, and I think if I'd been going through a challenging time at work or outside of work, those tiny micro inequities, they have the potential to erode my mental health and well-being in that particular situation.
Okay.
But if I had a leader that would say, good morning, Rachel, how are you going? How's your day? What do you got on today? How are you managing things? Goodbye. Hope you had a great day. Simple little things throughout the day. Maybe I can't do it with everyone because I've got a large team, but those little things actually hold people's psychological well-being together. It strengthens it.
But Rachel, he says something before, because we don't want to really just, especially with someone with your expertise on the topic, and I really mean it, it's not the word expertise saying it lightly, as in you've been there in the trenches, you've done this for 20-something years. Yeah. So I don't want to be light. I want to really have substance in the conversation. So sometimes you're busy, you're under stress as a leader.
Yes, you are.
Or even the success of the company. So,
Yes.
it could be really critical stuff. And so asking the question is one thing, Rachel, and I know you've just said that before. If anything, I'm inspired by what you said. Asking the question is one thing, but the listening,
Yes.
if you don't listen, it's actually worse.
It's worse. It's got to be genuine. Yes.
And, I have a problem sometimes where I'm not listening, but I'm genuinely not coming from a bad place.
Yeah.
I'm just stressed. I'm trying to make this company work for everyone. I've got 30, 40 families depend on this family, on this product, on this company. It creates that level of anxiety maybe for me, and I think I'm doing the right thing by having all my time focused on the success, and I don't realize, as you said, I'm creating those micro inequities. But I genuinely, not because I have any not appreciation or lack of appreciation to that person as a human being.
No.
Clearly, I've hired them because I respect them and I think highly of them, but not necessarily if they are telling me something about their weekend. Sometimes I switch off.
Yes.
And I regret it. 5 minutes, I go, oh my God, I don't think I even said something back to this guy. He must have realized I wasn't even listening. It kills me. Like, how do you recommend, do you have an exercise for someone like that or something to read, or how do you improve on becoming a better listener when it comes to that, as opposed to in a normal part of the day, if I'm in a business meeting, etc., let's say I'm the best listener, I'm doing my job well. But those little nuances that we are talking about and micro, what did you call them?
Affirmations
Affirmations.
or inequities.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. How do you say a leader or a manager, how can they become better at that?
Well, there's a couple of good points you've touched on there. One is as a leader, am I psychologically okay to show up for my team in this particular moment? Micro inequities only become an issue when they're habitual, when that's my normal way of relating. Of course, leaders go through a period of stress where I might come in and not have time to check in on the team or whatever, and that's absolutely fine.
Okay.
It's where it becomes that is my primary. And as you were saying there, it's not my intention, but I'm stressed, I'm under the pump. So now I'm engaging in those micro inequities. So if it is becoming more of a style, and we've been called in to coach people where micro inequities is their style. And as you exactly
Yes.
said, often because I'm so stressed myself, I just want to come into my office, shut the door, get them an email, start doing things. It's not my
Um,
intention to offend someone or to,
you've blown my mind away. Every 2 minutes there's a term that is I find just when I thought I've learned something interesting, I find something more interesting. You're amazing. What you just said, how it becomes a style.
yeah, that's when it's problematic.
This is
So
unbelievable.
we all go through as leaders. I go through that from time to time where I think, oh gosh, I'm so under the pump, I'm just going to come in and whatever.
Yeah,
And I probably don't say, oh, good morning, everyone.
yeah,
How was your weekend? Whatever.
yeah.
But to take your other question was around, well, how do I train myself? Because what you're training yourself in is to be present. And I always think it's an investment. It might take you 2 minutes. It might take you 5. It might take you 10. But it is an investment in capital. And I would like to think it is a massive investment
Yes,
because people want the human
yes,
beings. We like to be. We want to be with other humans. We want connection. We don't want to be in a
yeah,
workplace
yeah,
where I'm coming in and I don't have
yeah.
the quality of those
But it's a
relationships.
business imperative, as you put it for me on the
Yes.
phone, because we
Yes.
just realized, although it's going to make you happier person and better for you or your psychology as a leader, but we just realized if you don't build that trust, it's just not going to work. You're
Yes.
not going to be able to create that safe, psychologically safe place for the employee. You're not going to be able to get the
That's
most
right.
out of them. You're not going to be able to build the company. You're not going to be able to build that performance team. So it's
Correct.
even logically speaking, you have
Correct.
to do it. It's not just
You have
being
to do it.
nice.
No, it
It's
is an
both,
essential.
which is a win-win.
Especially it is a win-win, and especially in now where the younger generation, Gen Zs are very educated about mental health and well-being. They're coming into the workplace, they're in their kind of early 20s, and they are saying, I have the expectation that this workplace will cater to my well-being needs. I have the expectation that my leader will chat to me about my well-being needs. I have the high expectations for well-being. I might be asking about what sorts of things do you do for well-being around here? Do you have an employee assistance program? Do you have a birthday leave? Do you have whatever it might be?
Okay.
What sort of
Okay.
things do we do? So people are actually now, in order for us to have a good EVP, that employee value proposition, the business imperative is the need is, and people are prioritizing this above salary right now, above their remuneration. I want to work in a workplace
Okay.
where my mental health and my well-being
Okay.
is going to be considered and
Okay.
catered.
Let's break it down. We've got a bunch of leaders listening to it. Owners of a small business, CEO of a large business, uh, leaders, as in middle managers, any of the above. Okay, they're going, hold on. I've got this person when they come to work. They come to work at 8:30. I mean, my team, a typical person. I'm sorry, I said this
Yep.
person is someone in mind. No. My team, my people, in terms of, okay, Rachel, I'm listening to you. Cool, let's see if this is practical. Yeah? So, look, my people arrive at 8:30 and they leave at 5 on the dot. You want me to chat with them and do all that micromanaged chat, and yet I've told you I want high performance team. How all that is going to stack up?
Yeah.
how is that going to work?
Yeah.
Because these guys, when we chat, they're still going to leave at 5. They're not staying back a little. So, but however, we need to note here, people have their laptops and they can work from home if they wanted to, meaning if they really care about, about the team, if they're motivated and they feel you mean you're making the effort to create a good environment for them. They appreciate, they respect you. And if they have their KPIs clear, what is expected of them, and that's again on you to do that,
Yep.
then you don't need to worry about that. You can be nice, do whatever it takes to do these little things. People will make it work. They will find the time. They will find the focus, because it's not just the time. It's how focused they are within that time.
Mm.
It's therefore the performance, really what performance is,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So therefore, don't worry about that. They will make it work and they will be happy and they will stay. You still stick to that.
Yes.
Is that what we're saying? Can you elaborate on this
Yes.
kind of dilemma and the old way of seeing it and the new way of seeing it?
Yes.
So,
Okay. So it is. So I'm just going to share with you some of the research then. I'll come back to that question in a moment. But the research that's been done on looking at team wellbeing, and we know one of the biggest predictors of individual performance is good psychological well-being, right? So if I want to be a high performer, my foundations of psychological well-being are nice and strong. So when they've looked at the research on what is the biggest predictor in a workplace of an employee's performance or an employee's psychological well-being, they measure lots of things. They measure things like, is it a workplace where I'm in a job that plays to my strengths? Am I in a workplace where I've got variety, control, autonomy, working with a nice bunch of people, doing meaningful and purposeful things, getting a sense that I'm contributing? What is it about the workplace that contributes most to employee well-being? And time again, these studies, the results are quite compelling. And there are 2 predictive factors. And both of these predictive factors are to do with support in the workplace. So the first one is leader support. So the research has shown that 70% of my well-being as an employee is determined solely by the quality of my relationship with myself and my supervisor, team leader, my manager, my boss.
What does it mean, myself? I got the other one.
70% of my psychological well-being is determined by my relationship as in the employee and my boss.
Okay. I thought, sorry, I misunderstood. He said yes.
So a huge, if I feel as
and
if
that's that support. They
I've
feel
got
they're
the
supported.
supportive leadership.
They feel they can go back to them. They can ask them for help.
That's right.
They can confide with them about issues they're having, problems, etc. Yeah.
Doesn't mean I've got to speak to somebody 10 times a day, but it does mean there's about 12 key competencies that go into a supportive leadership capability. So if I feel as if I've got supportive leadership around me, what that does is it forms what we call a psychological safety net around me.
To related, I can see that, because part of that support, you want to be able to confide with them about maybe your lack of skills or something you did wrong or whatever. If you don't feel they can respond okay about that and be understanding and help you to fix it, I mean, it's so related. It's incredible. Right?
So that psychological safety net can keep me psychologically well, even if I've got a massive project and I'm going to be working really hard for the next 6 weeks. Even if I'm in a high performance job that's got long hours and challenging organizational change.
Yep.
Even if I've got personal issues going on outside of work, nothing to do with work, personal issues, that supportive leadership maximizes my chance of staying psychologically well. However, if I'm going through a changing time, a challenging time, high workload time that's unrelenting, a changing time where I can't see the end of the road, personal issues that are going on outside, and that supportive leadership drops off, there's no protective factor. That is the point. I start to move along that mental health continuum. I can become psychologically unwell. So it is a buffer. Supportive leadership is a massive protective factor. So when organisations are going through busy times, changing times, challenging times, hardship times, whatever it might be, it is where we really need that supportive leadership to be, I call it, accelerated and more visible and more present. And you can hold that team together all those individuals together. But the minute that I become task focused in my leadership style, I don't have
Or what
time.
focused?
Task focused,
Tough.
which is just task.
Oh, task. I'm so
focused.
sorry. I thought tough.
It
Task
could be tough
focused. Yeah,
Task
right.
focused. So the minute
That kind of robotic without a
Yes,
human around it, without that
that's
trust, without
right.
that. Yeah, right, right,
So
right.
the minute I become task focused as my BAU, and my team are going through a changing time, a challenging time, a hard time, whatever, it's the minute that people start to shift because there's no protective factor around them. So
Yep.
supportive leadership is a huge protective factor. But when leaders get busy, when they get stressed, guess what? The supportive leadership drops off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's risky because there's nothing to protect. There's nothing to anchor people around. However, the second biggest predictive factor to employee wellbeing in the workplace, as I mentioned, there were two that pinpointed to support. If it's not coming from the leader, or even if it is, the second biggest predictive factor is supportive peer and collegial relationships as well. So that can contribute up to about 30% of my psychological wellbeing is determined by the quality of my relationships with my peers and colleagues. And if that's supportive, we can ask each other for help. We can chat to each other. We can confide in each other. I can share a personal issue that might be going on. If I feel as if I've got that supportive team around me, that also forms a great psychological safety net. Look, it's not going to prevent every single person from experiencing a mental health issue. But when we do look at recovery from mental health, so when our Resilia team is doing their recovery work and people have gone through a time of being unwell, we always ask, tell me about the relationship with your boss. And if that manager is supportive in style, we know we can get that person back to work and back to function pretty quickly. And also if they say, hey, I've got a great, amazing, supportive team.
Okay.
But if they say, that's absent for me, I have no support from my boss, no support from my team, that mental health condition can take a while for recovery.
Remember the question I'm asking to please get some light. I'm a manager. 5 people.
Yep.
I'm going to make it very practical in your life. I'm a manager. 5 people. They are off to work at 8. Feel that if chat, they're not going to be doing more work. You know,
Oh, yes,
I'm
you're taking up their
distracting them
time.
from their work.
Yes.
So how can it be high performance team and compete with this other company that also maybe do 8:30 to 5?
Yep.
If I'm going to have these small chats that we talked
Yeah.
about, which is the something
Micro-affirmations,
equity,
yes.
micro confirmation.
Yes.
How can I be doing that? I start to refrain from doing that. Clearly, I don't have the maturity as a manager to understand. If you think I'm missing something here, I want you to explain why this is the false understanding.
Yes.
But
Yes.
you can see what I mean, the logic
Yes.
why some people don't do that, right?
Mhm. Yes. It can be a micro moment because as a leader behavior, what leaders' actions and behaviors and words speak 10 times louder than anybody else's. It could be a simple, we've got a one-on-one catch up. I might be talking to you and I might meet with you once a week, but I'm going to make a commitment in that time to that one-on-one. I'm not going to cancel it, even though I'm busy. It could be in a one-on-one catch
It
up.
doesn't have to be every day.
It doesn't
as long
have to
as
be
they
every
know that
day.
you care, you are that
That's
human.
right. Yes. It doesn't have to be every 5 seconds every day. It could be for my 5 employees. I'm walking in. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah.
How are you all? How are things going? How I know we've got that deadline going. How are you? How are you tracking? Just a little kind of check-in. If I see someone by the water cooler, how's your day going? How are things going?
Remember, we talked about Rachel. That's the dilemma for me. And as I said, some managers who clearly new to all this, and that's why you're here to educate us about that. So I know I'm wrong, but I want you to show me why.
Yeah.
So I'm going, we just said that to ask the question is one thing, but you got to listen. If you
Oh,
don't, it's even more
absolutely.
offensive.
That's
I remember
right.
someone
Taking
said,
a moment.
someone said about Bill Clinton, whether you agree or not, you don't necessarily need to like Bill Clinton, but we all agree he was successful at what he did. He was a very successful president. But nevertheless, they said you could be in a party with 1,000 people on the floor. When he's talking to you for those minute or two, he makes you feel there's no one else in the party, just you and him in a room. that, and I'm going, wow, I aspire to be that person, but I find myself distracted, but not coming from a bad place, not because I don't respect that person, I don't like them, I don't care about them, I want them to be happy, I want them to be successful, but I don't have those skills maybe or whatever, but also maybe coming from a place because I've got my own anxiety about making sure we are performing as a team. We are going to get there. And I'm thinking these are little distractions that we don't need them on
Yes.
because I know this person's going to leave at 5.
Yes.
What am I missing here? How do you
Yes.
create a high performance team? Why these little
Yes.
things sort of not very intuitive, but you're going to prove to us that although it's not intuitive, mathematically speaking, but it actually is better and it's
Yes.
going to help you to build that performance team.
Yes. It is really coming down to that micro moment of meaningful connection. It doesn't take long. It could be 30 seconds. It could be, hey, how was your weekend? What'd you get up to? And you're right, I've got to be present. If I walk off and I haven't listened to the answer,
Oh, the worst
that's a
thing.
microaffirmation. Oh, sorry, micro iniquity. Suddenly,
yeah.
I've gone down in that person's trust
Yeah.
account a little bit.
Yeah.
But the fact that I've stood there and went, wow, that's really interesting. Maybe I remembered something about you. How was
Yeah.
your son's soccer grand final on the
Yeah.
weekend? I remember you had
Yeah.
that big event on. Fantastic. How did that go? Oh, hey, school went back last week. How's everyone settling into the new routine? They can be micro moments.
So you're saying, look, that's
Seconds.
team of 5 people. You're over exaggerating, Anwar. It's 5 minutes a day. Come on, how much of a difference going to make? Is that what you're saying?
It could be 5
Okay.
minutes a day. It can be, you can do it in one-on-one catch-ups with people. It can be prioritizing. If you're in a one-on-one catch-up, it could be prioritizing that person's well-being as opposed to the task. You know, I know we're under the pump at the moment. We've got a big project, but how are you? How are you tracking? And then we'll talk about the work stuff.
Yeah,
So
I got it.
that conversation might go for 1 minute.
Yeah,
You know,
you're
it
right.
doesn't take long, but
You're
it's
right.
enough. You want your employees to feel as if you care about me, you have empathy for me, and you are willing to listen.
Yeah. So you see people, you talked about Gen Z in a second, a minute ago, and how they have certain expectations when it comes to mental health and safe, psychologically safe places, which is great. It's a very good thing, no question about it. The expectation, I'm a manager, I walk in a room and I've got a couple of teams in this room and they could be talking and they expect that they could talk indefinitely. They feel as if, they feel like this is the norm or they're challenging the power. Sometimes they make the point. They could just be chatting for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And how do you create an environment? Because clearly that started to go in the opposite direction, maybe,
Yep.
at least mathematically speaking, which is not necessarily maturely speaking.
Yeah.
Maybe mathematically speaking only started to go in the opposite direction of high performance. We started now, especially if these guys are 8:30 to 5.
Yeah.
I've got some people who do a lot more than 8:30 to 5. They get paid really well. They're in the $250,000 a year mark, a space, and they're happy to do, they do on average, they don't do more than 10 hours in a day, so about 10 hours. And they're cool, they understand that. But these guys, they're 8:30 to 5. And they think they can just have that conversation. And as a manager, because they're Gen Z and stuff, you don't expect you to show any pressure at all to trying to tell them that maybe this could be sped up or maybe this could be done during your 10 o'clock break or maybe have a chat with them at lunch or something.
Yeah.
I mean, is that really immature from a manager to think like that? Because you really want them to, it's part of building that safety place, and you've got to trust that they are mature adults. If you really explain to them exactly what they need to achieve, let them do it. They'll find the time. They will get it done no matter what. Can you speak to that? I find that very interesting.
Yeah, if you hold them to account, because either way, if you
Hold them to account.
if you were too task focused and you're so high on the task, you don't have the psychological safety net, supportive leadership. But equally, if you're too people focused and all we're doing is chatting all the time and all we're doing is social connection all the time and we're not getting to the task, that's not great either. So you kind of want to get people in the middle where we're coming to a meeting.
Can we explain that to people? Can we sit down and can we do that kind of education company? Can I sit with a couple of teams, about 10, 12 people, and actually explain that?
Yeah.
You know, apart from even clearly share this with them and get them to listen to this conversation and explain, say, look, this is a dilemma that any manager has. As you know, we're all And as a matter of fact, so interesting because those teams, they have uncapped potential for earning. If anything, the more they work, the more potential. Well, the more they efficiently and happily work, you can probably argue
Yes.
to be sort of more accurate. Nevertheless, you're trying, in a sense, you're helping them to make more money too, by the company making money. They get commission, uncapped potential. Yeah. So commercial team,
Yes.
sales, account management, etc. So can we sit down and have a conversation? Explain to them, look, as a manager, it's interesting. We have this dilemma. We want to see happy team. We're 100% a human being, and we want to see you happy. We want to see you happy at home, at work. We want you to look forward to come to work. We want you to build connection with people. That's all good, but we want to balance that with the company winning. And at the end of the day, when the company wins, you win. How do we create that balance? Is it a good thing to have this conversation with them? Just
it's
like that.
it's a great thing to have those conversations coming into the business. I want to know, well, how do things operate around here?
Yeah.
What is the culture here? And if I'm being role modeled, all we do is talk for 15 minutes at a meeting. It's supposed to be about this project, but all we're doing is social chit chat for the first 15 or 20 minutes, and we never get to the outcome. That's going to set the tone for me. So I love it when leaders kind of say, and we do it in our business, we say we're a high performance culture, yet we balance it with support. We balance it with concern for mental health and well-being. We balance it with psychological safety. And this is a little bit about us. So
Isn't that interesting?
we
the
have
way you
these
said it?
conversations.
The
Yeah.
way you said it, how we balance it with all that, which
Yeah.
is, this is so much more valuable to you as a human being than having that 5-minute chat or 10-minute chat.
Yeah.
That means nothing when you really know that you're supported and you're safe and you can come to us
Yes.
no matter what the problem
That's
is.
right. Yes.
That's a lot more valuable to you.
Yes.
To help us to remain that company, helps the company to thrive and continue to do well,
That's
because
right.
we're all winning from that.
Yes. And there's no, we have open discussions with our team around, we are a high performance culture. We've got clients that are high performance themselves. So we are a standard of excellence as well. And you are going to get the coaching and the mentoring to be the best psychologist, the best consultant that you can be. And we balance it with all these other things. We balance it with care. We balance it with all these things. But yes, we do expect, and we're going to help you along the way. So it's around, that's the evidence of supportive leadership. We expect the high performance and we want the high performance, but we're putting that in the supportive leadership context. We can help you. We can support you. We can assist you. So when it's put in that supportive leadership language and those discussions, suddenly I'm motivated to perform well. I don't mind getting constructive feedback because you've set it up to tell me, expect it, because I know that's going to help me. It's not done to annoy me or to wreck my day. It's done to help me in my career progression. But what happens is leaders don't have these conversations when people are coming in, or even conversations just at various points.
Let's break it down even more. This is really interesting, Rachel. I know this word, people say it for all kind of things. It doesn't mean nothing, but I really cannot find any better word. How interesting that is, because I started to get to feel I'm getting to the bottom of the problem, or the solution. I'm sorry, solution. The solution to the dilemma of how can you make the two things coexist, or how do you build a high performance team while still creating a perfect environment for people to want to be part of. Okay, so let's break it down. What is a high performing team anyway? In the sense that, okay, there's 24 hours in a day.
Yep.
You want to work, you want to have life, getting your own fun and family and sports and whatever. Yep. And you want to sleep. Yep. I mean, these things are scarce resources. Not much you can do about that. Yeah. The moon is going to do its thing, and Earth's going to do its thing in a day, and know. So you're working within these constraints, and so really it comes down to the fact that there's only so many hours. You can only get this person to work. In other words, if the race is all about how many hours you can get your employees to do, even though you're paying them more, I'm not talking about underpaying people or being So even if you're paying people, if the race is only about the hours, it's a race to the bottom, and it's limited, and everybody will end up doing the same. And you can hardly win against anybody else. So it has to be the quality of those hours, and that comes back to you. And the biggest quality you're saying is having that support environment.
Yeah.
So if it is about the quality of the hours, I use the word when I'm speaking with my people, the focus. I'm saying your commitment is very admirable. You've committed for about 45 hours this week to the company. We really appreciate it, but let's look at the focus of that. Focus and your wisdom about the priority of things. Did you spend time on things that are important but maybe not top priority important? Did you really dig enough to that, or did you let the mind convince you, oh, this is an important thing, I'll do it? Because something that you're good at and you fall in that thing.
Yes.
So we talk about all that, but what you're saying here is that supporting environment and for you to feel safe, that you can make mistakes and you can say an idea that's stupid in a meeting, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But also to come and confide with your manager about some help in a safe environment, knowing you're going to get the support and all that instead of being laughed at or whatever. Don't let me put words in your mouth. I'm just saying it seems like you're claiming, and I seem to agree anyway, that this would be probably the biggest contributor to get the best out of those hours, meaning the efficiency, meaning what I've been calling the focus. And that is the only time, because that has got no limit. The hours in a day has got a limit.
Yeah.
You cannot compete. You can only compete so much with that.
Yes, true.
But the quality of the hours has got no limit. And the more people feel they are supportive,
Yes.
the better they're going to do.
Yes.
And that is the better currency to
That
be
is the
focused on
currency.
instead of the hours.
Yes, I like that. That's around, yes. So it's around having a well-being lens or supportive leadership lens over the top of high performance, right? So you can be a high performer, but eventually that high performance could detract if I feel as if I don't have it with that, that lens of supportive leadership around me. So people will thrive. That's environments where people thrive and flourish because I'm signing up for this job. I want to work hard. I want to be a great consultant. I want to learn everything that you can give me. I'm a sponge. I want to learn. Very often people have, good intentions. I want to do all these things. So let's create an environment that they can thrive and they can flourish in. And that's what it's all about. If I can actually create that environment, it's great for my performance and it's good for my well-being at the same time. I'm going to be, top of my game. I'm not going to be much use if I'm burned out, if I'm disgruntled, if I've got the 3 Ds of depression, disgruntlement, disillusionment, discontent.
And what you said, the image management stuff, if half of my time is worried about if they know I've got this and if I know about this and I'm trying to hide all these things,
That's right.
that has got to be big cost.
Huge. I mean, I work with clients where as I mentioned, I work a lot with graduates. I've had graduates say to me, I have sat there for 3 hours at my desk not knowing what to do, but I didn't feel as if it was psychologically safe to go to my manager to say, I got no idea about this task you've given me.
Yeah.
I have no idea what to do. I've sat there for 3 hours, gone home with a migraine, in a ball of anxiety, because it's not psychologically safe for me to say, hey, can somebody show me or help me?
Can you comment on this? Am I wrong to think about it like this, or just for people listening to really get a solid, practical example? So I've got anxiety. I'm sitting at my desk, and by definition, anxiety, speaking of mindfulness and stuff, by definition, anxiety is the mind is engaging you with the future and the past, meaning what will happen if this thing, and this is going to happen because you did this and stuff.
Yeah.
So if I am now engaging so much from my brain about managing my image, what's it called again?
Positive impression management, yes.
Impression management, positive impression management. If I'm spending some of my brain power on doing that, and I'm someone who has anxiety, I'm that person, and I'm doing that.
Yeah.
In itself, it's creating an infinite loop of
sure.
going, okay, because if they're going to know I've got this problem, and if they know it's going to this happen, I'm going now spending hours worried how I'm going to lose my job and how people are going to laugh at me and how someone's not going to like me anymore and that girl I saw on the lift is going to do this. And so it's going to take anxiety to another level.
The downward spiral. In other
Downward
words,
spiral.
The downward spiral. It will create a ruminative looping thought process,
Okay.
which means I'm going to go round
Yeah.
and round in that
Yeah.
same loop,
Yeah.
and I will create the downward spiral in my mental health
So
and
let's
well-being.
take that
yes.
to this manager listening to this,
Yes.
which I was thinking, how do we convince these folks? So you've got 8 hours in a day in the contract. This person we just used as an example, the person with anxiety who for some reason, even if you're a good person as a manager and a good company, based on complete ignorance, not by design, you did not create the environment for them where they feel safe to let people know about their issues.
Yep.
They are nice people and they like you because they know you're a good person. And they're sitting at their desk for 12 hours,
Yes.
not even 10.
Yes.
And yet,
Yeah.
5 hours spent on that rubbish.
Yes.
How are they going to be performance managing here? Performing, I'm sorry.
They're going
That
to
is
be
an absolute example
Oh yeah.
how the quality will be so much,
Yes.
higher with creating that environment.
That's right. And I know you may think that that type of example is a bit extreme, but actually we see those examples where people are sitting there for 2 or 3 hours in that ruminative thought process,
Yeah.
and their mental health, it's taking a toll, a significant toll, because that's not been, the psychological safety has not been set up. So the antidote is leaders creating that psychological safety culture from the get-go.
Yeah.
It's even
And the sad thing is, correct me on that, Rachel, is the fact that it's not by design. The manager's probably not probably, let's assume the manager could be really nice.
Yes.
Just doesn't know any better
That's right.
that this is happening under their nose.
Yes.
And this person, because this manager is nice and all that, they are trying to do their best.
Yeah.
They are doing more hours, but still not going to be able to perform.
Yes.
I mean, wouldn't that be sad?
Yes.
Just by simply that person realizing that, the manager having that maturity and that knowledge, that which is what you educated me about, and this problem will be solved.
Yeah.
80% of that anxiety or the time spent on anxiety would be reduced, probably not 100%, but if you slash it by 80%, can you see the difference?
Yes. Yes, you can absolutely stop that little problem from becoming a big one. And that's that thing about, as we said before, psychological safety is not something, I can be as nice as anything as a leader, but if I have not worked at creating psychological safety, it's just not going to exist in my team. I actually have to do a bit of work to create that.
Yes, got to build that
So I've
culture
got to
and lead
build
by
it.
example.
And even if it's only 4 or 5 people, I've got to build that culture. And we have in our place, in our company, I think it's very important. I and our other co-founder, we do what's called the director's welcome, and that's where we set the tones. Every single new employee that comes in, we spend an hour to an hour and a half and do the director's welcome. This is who we are. This is our psychological safety. Even come to us as directors if you don't feel as if you can go to your manager. This is psychological safety is important to us, or support is important. This is what you're going to notice working here. And we do like excellence, but we're going to help you to achieve that. We set the tone from day one in their induction so that this is the experience I'm getting from day one. And we know the induction experience early on predicts success in a job.
Part of our platform gave me this idea is the onboarding and induction.
Yes.
So we could record a video coming from me, talk about that topic, and have it in the induction pack they can watch to explain how important that is.
Yes.
Give example, have a few people with me that where we have a laugh and have an example how it's okay for someone to say, I've made, for example, in there, it could be that I share about some of the stuff-ups I've made.
Yeah.
And someone else, an executive and an employee sitting in that room, we record ourselves talking about some of these stuff-ups and laughing about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to get people to go, oh, wow, the leader is actually saying people are humans and we make mistakes and we talk about them.
Yes.
You gave me this idea. I'm going to do that.
And that's a great idea. The other thing that you just touched on there was that ability to be vulnerable, to share a moment of vulnerability, because we all, we've all had stuff ups. We've all messed that tender up or didn't get to, to the tender on time or whatever it might be. We've all had challenges where we have, failed, for want of a better word, and not been successful. And that vulnerability is being shown to be a huge predictor. That leader vulnerability has been shown to be able to create psychological safety in a split second. When I share that with an employee, about how I am sharing a little bit of that vulnerability as well. And suddenly, oh, even you've done that. That automatically creates that psychological safety.
Do you observe when you look at our leaders, as in the leaders, let's say the prime ministers in our country, in your career since you started to become aware about this topic, say last 25 years now, you've been observing these leaders, uh, the impact they have on that topic, their personality in the way they speak and they speak with their people. Let's say they're having an interview and they've got an assistant or they're in the Parliament House and talking and
Yes.
interacting, how they could really indirectly send a message to the community about this kind of stuff, about your message, what you're trying to achieve in life, how they could be enforcing it or actually giving it a setback.
Oh, totally. That's right. In terms of obviously them, anyone in power,
Psychological
that
safety
psychological safety
environment.
Yeah, and I
In
think
their own behaviour.
in their own behaviour. That's right. Their own microaffirmations, in a way. Like, how are they
Yes.
role modeling? Role
Yes.
modeling this is really important, and you see it with anyone, even if it's a sports star or if it's a politician or somebody in a company, and they set the tone for mental health by maybe revealing, hey, you know what? I've gone through a little bit of hardship with my mental health or my well-being from time to time. And so often those role models, if it's a sporting hero, if it's some amazing politician, whoever it may be, when they speak up and share that vulnerability, suddenly see things changing automatically. People go, you're human.
Unless they do it on 60 Minutes just to close.
That's true. Yes, you got to make sure that the
20 days before
yes.
the election, they go on 60 Minutes and bring the wife to
Yes.
say we are humans,
That's
not
right.
psychos.
That's
Okay.
right. Well, I think it's interesting because work was probably, well, certainly since I've been in this profession, work was traditionally not really a place where you would bring mental health or well-being conversations. It was not psychologically safe 15, 20 years ago to talk about your mental health or well-being.
Yeah.
So this is a massive turnaround now. So leaders are now
must be
just getting
pleased.
these skills. Yeah, I am
In the
pleased.
last 20 years, people like yourself, the impact they made.
Yes. And also the prevalence rate has increased, or we've got better at diagnosing, or we've got better at talking about this stuff. So
Interesting.
there's
yeah,
still a
okay.
little bit of that hangover around, is my workplace? And that's why some people say, should I tell my manager that I'm actually struggling with a mental health issue and I need some adjustments or flexibilities?
You have changed my life, Rachel.
Oh, really?
It's just started right now. You have no idea.
Oh, I'm very happy.
I have not said this and meant it in this way probably ever in my life. You've given me so many ideas. I can see the clarity about how I'm going to manage this topic and the importance of that topic. I'm going to have a company-wide in-person meeting next week. I'm going to plan it right. I'm going to rush it. Not going to rush it. And this is so important. It is so clear. I was 100% struggling, and I'm thinking you're going to struggle to convince me that has got a positive impact on performance. I had no idea how you're going to even be close, and you've just blown it apart in terms of how easy you made it to understand that the mental having a safe place and conducive for someone with mental illness, and that psychologically safe environment and all that, how it is the only factor worth investing in when it comes to performing, because hours are limited. There's only so many hours in a day.
And it lays the foundations of high performance. You can have high performance for a bit, but without those foundations, it's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Suddenly your next competitor is going to be getting ahead. Whereas if we lay those foundations, you're going to get amazing staff retention. You're going to get great employee engagement. You're going to get wonderful productivity and performance. And you're going to have a bit of fun along the way. You're going to enjoy your work. And, we want to enjoy our work. We spend so many hours at work.
So what's the number one mistake leaders make that hurt employees' mental health?
I would say from our consulting experience, it is often just expecting my staff to be on 24/7. It's almost like that switched on. Everyone's constantly switched on, and not role modeling or not allowing opportunities for recovery. because
Okay.
I see a lot of people
Okay.
that can't switch off,
Mm.
and almost the expectation that I'm going to be on 24/7 in case something bad happens, in case I get a phone call, in case someone needs me. And even if I'm not physically at work, psychologically, I'm still switched on.
So that's what the government did recently. That means you must be very much in favour of that.
The right
You
to
like that?
disconnect.
Yeah,
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 well, I
yeah.
thought that that was an interesting thing because that's certainly what we're seeing is that, even if I'm not physically working, psychologically, I'm on. Checking my emails,
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
about work, I'm kind of doing this. So that right to disconnect, I thought that's an interesting thing because we are seeing significant, levels of burnout arising at that time when that was brought in, and it was designed as I guess a bit of a protection factor to really say to people, hey, we need to start carving out recovery time because in any high performance culture, I liken people like elite athletes, right? You wouldn't expect an elite athlete to run back to back marathons. They are only great at their marathon if they've got some healthy recovery time
Yeah.
in there. They're training hard, but they've got
My-
recovery.
My mind is going a million miles an hour. As I said to you, you've changed my life forever because what I'm thinking is, and again, from what you inspired me and helped me to connect the dots with, I'm thinking back to the high performance team and how I'm going to connect what you just said and the right to disconnect. Is that what they call it? Um, and the ability to switch off. How you explained it. So even if you're a high performing team and the employee is on board with why they need to do the 12 hours because they want to do that for the next 5-10 years because they know they're making more money, they're getting paid for that, they're on board. So let's say they're doing even 12 hours a day, which is a lot. We don't even do that here, but let's say it's 12 hours a day. If you focus on what you've been advising me to do, which is the psychological safety aspect and that supporting culture,
Yes.
it's still going to be fine because it's not just about that Anwar is calling me after my 8th hour.
Yeah.
It's how he talks to me that I can say to him, hey, listen, man, I'm just putting the kids to bed. I'll call you in 10 and we'll laugh about it. Just meaning there's no anxiety when Anwar calls me.
That's right. Yes.
As long, so
That's
this
true.
is going to work at
Yes.
so many levels. I keep going back
Yes.
to
Yes,
why
that's
I'm
true.
saying to you, you've changed
Yes.
my mind. I can see it working everywhere, helping
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes, because
Do you know what I mean?
if I've got those emotional deposits in the emotional bank account, I might ring you once to say, hey, I just got to ask you something. I need to know something really urgent. I know it's kind of a bit later at night or whatever, or you may have
Yeah.
logged off or whatever.
Yeah.
If I've got those emotional deposits,
Yeah.
I'm not going to mind.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it might take me 5 minutes
Yeah.
to answer a question. Again, I think it's where it's a constant
Yeah.
when it's unrelenting.
But what I'm trying to say is, it's the quality of it because even if it's 5 hours
Yeah.
and there's anxiety during that and lack of trust and the non-human thing and the task-driven and all that,
Yes.
the opposite of everything you
Yes.
taught me I should be doing,
Yes.
even 5 hours is too much.
Yes.
What is too much? It's the
Yes.
quality again. It's similar to what I was saying before for high performance. The currency of hours is limited. Very similar here. If there's anxiety, even 2 hours is not
Yes.
worth it, or it's going to be damaging for that person.
Yes.
And yet 12 hours could be still okay
Yes.
if there's that safety zone and that trust
Yes.
and that supporting culture,
Yes.
right?
Yes, because you've got to think about how switched on your prefrontal cortex really is after 12 hours. If I've had a very busy day where I'm doing a lot of thinking and processing and working on things, which most of us do, your prefrontal cortex, all your neurotransmitters are pretty tired by then. They're
Sure.
pretty reduced. So
Sure.
it's around, thinking maybe it is better if I give permission for this person. Hey, go home. You've had a long day. It's been a busy day. Go home. Have a good, spend some time with the family, switch off, relax, whatever. See you back here tomorrow. You're much better to give permission. I think sometimes people don't give permission for their teams. I work with cultures where people said, oh, I'd finish my work at 5, but again, it wasn't psychologically safe to leave at 5. So I sat there till 6:30 when it felt like it was a little bit more okay to leave. So it's interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it? Just around that,
Mhm.
I've got to be on. I don't want to be seen to be leaving at 5 because that might be viewed, if I'm in a psychologically unsafe culture, how's that going to be viewed? And if I've left before the boss, that might not be viewed so well.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you for that. The second question I've got is, What's the most important lesson you've learned about workplace well-being?
The most important lesson, I would say, is probably just how valuable the elements of supportive leadership is as a protective factor. I mean, it's so powerful. That's why we work with organisations and they might be looking at different initiatives. And I always go to leader support. How skilled are your leaders at supportive leadership? How skilled are they in creating psychological safety? Because when we think about it, 70% of an employee's well-being is determined by their relationship with their boss.
Mm.
That's a huge chunk. So probably my biggest learning is just that huge impact as a protective factor.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. You called it buffer as well at some point,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, it's a buffer.
It made my mind just go in so many directions in terms of how you've explained it. It's so true because people realize they have the ability to have a chat. It creates a buffer where, you know, prevents a lot of things from going wrong. No matter how tough and difficult and challenging the issues and the tasks are, when they know they can have that conversation in an honest way, that is that buffer where things are corrected and then we recharged and set
Yes.
on the right direction again.
Yes.
So it prevents a lot of mistakes, even in terms of the business, meaning
True.
reducing the cost to the business, let
Yes.
alone the psychological safety and you know improvements that it impacts on the person as well.
Yes, correct.
So
yes.
it's both actually the business benefits, and so it's that
And
layer where
personal.
things can be discussed and reset.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Things can be reset. I like that because it can be reset. And if you're not there to reset, someone goes off down this completely different path and you're like, oh, if only
Because
we'd
they're
had
not
that
talking to you,
conversation.
because they don't trust you.
Yes.
You think you're going to get angry. You think they're going to get punished for it. They might lose their job. They might lose their bonus, etc. Right?
That's right.
They're not going to talk to you, and then they keep going on a wrong tangent as opposed to
That's
knowing
right.
they can come to talk to you about it.
Yes, that's right. And that becomes, who do I show up as a leader every day? Who am I as a leader? What qualities of myself do I showcase or role model, or what of myself do I bring into this culture? I always say to leaders, how are you showing up?
Can you undermine your middle managers if you are the leader, and which is you certainly open my mind about these things that I need to do, such as the little chats and listening to people, getting to know people, and create that trust with them.
Yes.
Could you still do that without undermining the middle managers if you do that with those respective teams directly with those?
Well, that's a good question, because really that research on 70% of team wellbeing is your direct manager. So that has the biggest impact. So I could be, if it's the middle manager I report into, it's that person that has the biggest impact. So it's kind of like in my role now, we've got managers that are responsible for teams. I'm not having one-on-one catch-ups with those team members at all. But when I'm in the office with them, I'll try and walk over and say, hi, haven't spoken to you for a while. How are you?
That should never be
How are things
seen
going?
as an undermining that middle manager.
No. And I like that. That's respect and empowerment for your middle managers. But the fact that you, as a CEO, has gone up to someone and saying, hey, how are you settling in? I know it's your second week here. How are things going for you? Just little micro moments. The fact that you have taken a moment out.
Could you be undermining the manager in doing that? Or is that just a fear?
I don't think you could be. It might be undermining if you were doing one-on-ones and, having more formal kind of
talking about their work as opposed to what they did on the weekend.
That's right.
Which is really what we're discussing here.
Yes. That could be perceived maybe as undermining, but it's also good, I think, for people to know, I feel comfortable with you. If there is, for whatever, any reason with that middle manager, I suddenly don't feel so comfortable, or there's something there, I still feel comfortable to come to you. So I think it's around still creating a little bit of the psychological safety.
Because you are not just an organizational psychologist, you are a psychologist, yeah?
Yes.
So can we dig about, because that's an important point. I really feel a lot of people would love to learn about that. If you take a minute, if you don't mind, to unpack this. I'm the CEO. I've got, let's say, just middle management, just one layer of managers, and I've gone to make a coffee, and I've come across a couple of people there, and the manager is there, or I'm close to their desk, and someone says, "Hey, how you going? And how is your weekend?" you're saying, I've got to, we just said, I've got to pay attention to that and go over and say, yeah, good, not too bad. I did a blind, how was your weekend and stuff? Can you please explain why this has nothing to do with undermining that manager that's sitting at that desk because you're being nice to that person? Can you please just confirm that is the case, as opposed to just saying, no, it doesn't. Well, why it doesn't? Can you prove it to these people that it doesn't? So they encourage to do it, as opposed to shying away from that. They might feel, oh, yeah, I'm good, thank you, no worries, because, I don't want to undermine that manager. I don't want to seem to be friendly or building direct relationship with that person. Can you please speak about that?
Well, I think you can still build the human connection piece in a micro moment. You're not hanging around for an hour chatting, but in that micro moment, you can still show I have care for you as a human. I'm interested in you as a person. I have made the time for you, even if it's a micro moment. I'm catching up a little bit more around the social aspect, as opposed to I'm not chatting to you about, oh, how's your work performance going? Or I understand about this.
Absolutely not. No.
So
I'm making an assumption you're not doing that.
It's very much about, it's more of that human connection, social connection in a way.
So you're saying the fact that it's only social connection, it should not, and you don't believe it would send the wrong message about who's your boss? No,
I do not think it would send the wrong message. Or sometimes with my staff, I've gone past someone in passing and said, oh, hey, by the way, I had some great client feedback about you the other day, and I wanted to pass that on. So that might have come to me, but not gone to the direct manager.
Sure.
But I will go to that staff member and say, hey,
and you would do it one-on-one with them as opposed to the manager being there?
Not in a formal meeting. It's just like in passing. Sure. As I'm going past their workstation. Oh, hi. Haven't spoken to you for a while. By the way, I was speaking to a client the other day. I just wanted to let you know they were so happy. So as long as I'm not giving constructive feedback in a public forum, it's okay to celebrate the success.
So I've got a bit of an anxiety about that now, because it's a new thing for us trying to build an executive team.
Yes.
I've started it this year. I spoke with you on the phone about that.
Yes,
remember?
That's right. Yes.
So I might have a little bit of an anxiety, meaning I'm over-exaggerating in my mind the negative impact that me having a quick convo like that with someone directly while the manager's sitting there at the desk, it could have. And although in my mind I agree with you, and I've made that, I understand the distinction between talking about being nice about them as human beings versus talking about work. I would never do that.
Yeah.
And I know it can create that distance between the two, but I still have that little anxiety about it. You're saying you shouldn't, and you encourage me to do more of it.
Yeah, well, it might just be a 3-second conversation, 5 seconds. It might not be long, because I think, well, what's the opposite is that you walk by that person, and you walk by every day and you don't say, hey, how you going?
Whoa.
And that would be weird, right?
Whoa.
So that would become, well, what CEO do I want to be? Who do I want to be remembered for? What do I want to be remembered as? It might take me 5 seconds to engage that conversation, because remember about the impact. What if I don't? And what message does that send somebody?
I like that. Brilliant. I like it. Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. What's one change every company should make today?
I would say treating mental health exactly the same as people treat physical health. Still, sometimes in our minds there is a different mindset. So if I if I'm in the kitchen and I spill some water, I don't hesitate. I think, okay, that's a risk there. I need to clean that up. I need the yellow hazard signs around it saying caution. We don't hesitate in mitigating a physical risk at all, because we get in our mind someone could slip over that water and they could injure themselves and I could get sued. So we do not hesitate. However, I could walk by a psychological risk in the workplace. I could turn a blind eye, because that's what I see people still doing, a bit of a blind eye.
What would be the example? Give us an example for that one. You gave us the example of the hazard thing.
The hazard
water,
thing.
Slippery,
so it could
be
I've seen a psychological risk in the workplace. So maybe I've heard somebody speak to someone in a bullying manner. Like I've heard disrespectful behaviour.
That's a good example.
That's a psychological risk, right? I've heard it, and I've chosen not to put up the yellow safety signs, the hazard signs, caution, keep away. I've decided to walk by it. So very often, or even I've seen somebody not looking at themselves and not looking their bright,
Yeah.
sparky self,
Feeling a bit flat.
feeling a bit flat. But
Mm.
I don't feel comfortable to address that psychological risk that I see there. So I'll walk right by it and
Yeah.
avoid it. So this is what we see, is that still today, even though organisations have done an amazing amount of work in bridging that gap, I still do see us having a different mindset about physical safety and dealing with those actions very confidently and proactively, and a little bit of a more reluctant mindset for psychological safety or psychosocial. So I'll be prepared maybe to walk by it, even though a physical safety risk could be, if I ignore it, depending on your job, it could be life-threatening for me to ignore a physical safety risk, but it can be just as life-threatening for me to ignore a psychological safety risk.
So the answer to the question of what's one change every company should make is
Treating psychological safety exactly the same as we view physical safety at
Brilliant.
work.
thank you. Okay, how can HR spot mental health issues before they escalate?
Well, if it's already gone to HR, it might already be a little bit escalated, because I'm a firm believer in giving the leaders and managers
Yeah,
the skills so
agree.
that they can notice it.
Yep.
It's already a little bit escalated
Yeah.
by the time it
That's
goes
good.
to HR.
Good answer. So that means the
So-
question should be about the manager.
That's right. How can a manager notice?
Yeah.
It can be, people would have telltale signs in physical, behavioural, mood, cognitive. They're kind of the main ones. It could be for physical. It can be somebody getting run down all the time. They've got a cold or a flu and they can't quite shake it, so they're reduced immunity. They're talking about headaches or migraines. They don't look physically, they don't look well, they look tired, they look exhausted. If people have a mental health issue, chances are they're getting 2 or 3 hours of disturbed sleep a night. People look shattered. It could be skin conditions, acne, psoriasis, those types of things, on that physical health issue. If it's moods could be up and down, angry, short-tempered, short fuse, withdrawn, kind of disconnected. If it's behavioural, the most common one is I'm disconnecting, I'm keeping myself to myself. Maybe I'm not coming into work like I would normally do. Maybe I'm choosing to work from home a lot more.
Yeah.
Suddenly 2 weeks goes by and you realise you haven't seen that staff member. It could be
Withdrawal.
that withdrawal is very, very common. Eventually the prefrontal cortex gets impacted. Eventually it impacts my memory, my concentration, my ability to produce a high output of a high quality. I might be working extra hours. I might be more absent. I might be present. I might be physically here, but psychologically I'm not. So in its simplest form, get to know your team, what their normal is in terms of their psychological well-being, and look at, even if it's your gut reaction, that person doesn't seem right. They seem a bit off today. That's not their usual self, and it's been going on. There's no bounce back. There's no recovery. And that's been going on for a couple of days. Trust your gut reaction. It's all about what is a significant shift for that person as I know them.
Okay. What's the biggest challenges that HR leaders face in regards to workplace mental health these days?
I would say one of the biggest ones is leader burnout.
Leader burnout.
Leader burnout. Yep. So how am I, as an HR professional, supporting the leaders? Last year, the research on leader burnout around that October, November time was suggesting that around 70% of leaders were experiencing significant burnout after the last few marathons that we've been on over the last 4 or so years. We've never kind of had that ability to have a bit of a reset. We've gone from marathon to marathon every year. And so leader burnout is a massive issue, particularly at that end of last year, around how do leaders have sustainable well-being when they're managing a business, managing life outside of work and teams, BAU.
Where do you think that stems from? Is it because, I can certainly understand the obvious one, because as I mentioned before, let's say, pressure starts from the top, from the board, comes to the CEO talks to the executive team, puts the pressure on them, and they might feel that fear and anxiety about the performance and the numbers, the growth. I can see that happening.
Yep.
But do you think this is everything? This is where it comes from, or is it perhaps sometimes they're not equipped? They're not themselves equipped with the knowledge of how to manage people. So, for example,
Correct. Yes.
for example, one of the things that I'm doing this year, as I said, is I'm learning to delegate. Maybe they themselves need similar skills. They need to delegate in many ways.
Yeah.
And they need that whole trust-based and all that to make their life easy. So they don't have to do as many hours.
Yeah.
So, part of the reason I had to learn how to delegate, and it's imperative, you cannot grow if you don't do that,
Yes.
is because, again, there's only so many hours in a day. There's so much I can do. I need to build people that are even better than me and leaders in their own right, and so I can create 100 me. Well, it's the same for them in that individual manager, in the sense they need those skills. So is it really just because we're putting the pressure on them, or is it because they're not equipped how to diffuse that pressure by having a delegation, the happy team, the etc., so they don't have to do as many hours and still get the job done?
Yeah, I think it is a combination of both. I certainly think doing business in the VUCA world now is probably more challenging. Every business I speak to at the moment is upsizing, downsizing, going through change, going through some sort of period of transition or uncertainty. So I do think it's a combination of the VUCA world makes it more challenging for leaders. Leaders are required to do so many more things in the VUCA world. There's so much more. There's cognitive overload. There's a lot of emotional load. Now I've got my team that I've got to, manage and do all these things. And yes, maybe I've been promoted on technical competence. So I think it's leaders are stretched. I would say leaders are very stretched. And now I'm responsible for people's mental health and well-being as well, that they feel they're not necessarily responsible wholly for, but they certainly do have a much more positive duty. So I feel like leaders' roles now are very much stretched across people functions and task functions and board performance and all of those sorts of things as well. So the VUCA world has made it more challenging for leaders, sure.
Speaking with employees, yourself, you must have spoken with thousands of employees in your career. For those who have mental health issues such as anxiety, if we take this example of an anxiety, someone with a decent level of anxiety, do you feel when it comes to work, there's even an additional challenge here because they need that job to support their life and to support even the bills for their medications, perhaps, although I hate that word, I hate medications, I feel should always be an alternative to actually taking physical medications, but nevertheless, let's call it the treatment, seeing your team, yourself, professionals. So that has got a cost to it.
Yes.
So you need the job to support your lifestyle and the treatment.
Yes.
But you need the treatment to even keep the job, meaning if you're not really good, you're not going to be able to get the job.
Yes.
How do you say to someone who may be having anxiety about they are in that vicious cycle, how they can break it?
Yeah. What we do certainly when we're looking at assisting people or recovery from a mental health issue like anxiety is, again, it comes back to those. If we're involved, we will try to look at those elements of good work, because if I've got those elements of good work in my job, I'm going to get better faster. If I've got good psychological safety in my team, I'm going to get better faster. If I've got a supportive leader, I'm going to get better faster.
Yeah.
So suddenly, and that could be, I'm having a little bit of flexibility. I'm allowed to finish work at 4:30 on a Thursday so I can go and see my treating psychologist. Or maybe I'll do a little appointment, a telehealth appointment when I'm working from home on a Monday. So sometimes allowing, as a leader, if I know about it, if I know you've got anxiety, how can I support you within that treatment and give you that flexibility? What do you need from me to be able to do that? But if I don't know, because the psychological safety isn't there, then here I am busy delegating and
Guess what?
doing
You read my
everything.
mind. That's the next question.
Oh, is it?
So let's ask that question, because we might come back to this and see how they're related.
Yes.
So the next question here, Chris wrote that question. Should employees disclose their mental health issues or struggle with their managers, with their work, with their company?
Yes.
So what are they looking for to feel safe?
Yes.
First of all, you might suggest even don't join that company if you don't feel they can be that company for you. That's going to be a negative environment for you. But nevertheless, how do you feel they will all they know about the company is they go to the interview. That's where they start to learn about people and the culture there, in terms of how people behave in interviews, etc. They start to get a
Yes.
sense of the people
Yes.
there and the culture. Then let's say everything goes well, and that could be a little bit masked. You don't really know. Then you start on your first day in probation. You're worried that you can disclose that you can still going to be kicked out, or without
Yeah.
you knowing why. They don't have to tell you why too much. Probation, you're fairly vulnerable.
Yeah.
So how do you? Yet you've got this still to go back to our question. You know that you need to disclose it for you to be better, be in
Yes.
the right environment. You don't want to have that
Yes.
anxiety about it.
Yes.
So having to mask it,
Yes.
which is the image, the positive image impression
Yes.
management, right?
Yes.
Um, so how do you then do you advise people to maybe from the very beginning to even ask during interviews during the first question when how should they do it? And maybe you want to take the example with someone fairly desperate for a job versus someone maybe they have a job, they are being headhunted. Clearly, there's a big difference here. So let's be practical. Someone who has options versus someone who doesn't have options.
Yeah. So if someone, from my experience, I think a lot of people do not disclose at interview. I think a lot of people they don't disclose. Hey, I've got an anxiety condition or a depressive disorder or what have you. I don't think they disclose often in probation either.
Yeah,
I think people disclose when they feel as if, oh,
more safe,
I feel more safe,
legally safe.
legally safe. However,
Yeah.
if I have a different manager who's supportive and trusted and all of those sorts of things, I do feel as if I can disclose that
Yeah,
in probation. I
Yeah.
do feel as if I can raise that as an issue. I mean, we've had people interview with us who, because we promote psychological safety, and I think the way that we conduct interviews gives people the sense of psychological safety. I've had people in interviews say, I'm neurodiverse, or I have had a mental health issue in the past. And I say, okay, I'm curious to learn a little bit more, that curious mindset. Tell me how you perform at your best. What workplace factors, what workplace supports would help you to perform at your best, either if with your neurodiversity or with your mental health condition. And we have a discussion with that in an interview, and we think, okay, I think that's okay. And we can accommodate that, or that doesn't sound too onerous.
Yeah.
And so, but people will sense that through your words, your presence, what you say, how you say it at interview. So you can establish psychological safety even in an interview. You can establish it in probation
if you
as
have
well.
options, you have to then. I guess the advice here, what you're saying, Rachel, if you're someone with options, why do you want to even start a job, quit your previous job, start a job, and
No, I
then realize
know.
that it's the wrong environment for you? You probably
Yes.
do want to really test them right then in interview, see how they react and what they say to know it's going to be the right environment for you, right?
Yeah. Well, I've certainly, I think, have people do that where they're making a call of, if you can't support me in my mental health and well-being, then this
Yeah.
is not the right
Yeah.
business for me. And that's why people will ask at interview, tell me what you do, because I'm sussing that out. I'm
Yeah.
also interviewing you
Yeah.
to know if this is the right environment or
Yeah.
culture for me. And people, I know a lot of high performers that have said, I've gone to interview or I've been in that probation period and I've just known that is not the right
Yeah.
option for me and my mental health.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like, to summarize this, and the question is if and when they should disclose their mental health issues with an employer. I guess to me, Rachel, if you have options from the interview, make sure you're very clear
Yes.
that there's a match in terms of what kind of environment that would really aspire you and you would survive and thrive in for the next 3
That's
5
right.
years.
Yes. That's
meaning,
right.
Meaning their maturity and what you educated me about
Yes.
today, the level of psychological safety they have in that company,
Yes.
and the supporting culture they have, the level of that supporting culture, and if that's going to meet it's aspire you enough
Yeah,
or not.
that's
You
true.
should really try and understand it from the very beginning. You waste your time otherwise,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. And also it's about weighing that up too, because I don't have to legally disclose that I've got a mental health issue or a history of depression at all. So there's no onus on me as an individual to disclose that at all. I might decide to keep that private, particularly if that mental health issue is something of the past. It's not really impacting on me.
Yep.
I've got my own way of staying on top of my mental health and well-being.
Okay.
I've got my own coping skills, my
Sure.
own resources. I might
Okay.
choose not to. It's not a current issue. But if it is a current issue, and we work with lots of people where it is a current issue, they want to have the match. Otherwise, that mental health is going to spiral and be exacerbated if I'm not in a culture that's going to support that anyway.
Okay. And if you don't have options, you're desperate, you need a job, I guess the advice would be probably don't disclose it. And when you're in a job, you will discover how mature they are, what kind
Yes,
of
true.
supporting
That's
culture
right.
they are from that point of
That's
view.
correct.
If it's good, you keep going. And if it's not good, just try and get out of that place as soon as you can when you find a better option.
Yeah.
I mean, really, there's no other way,
Well,
right?
it could be also I always say to people, do you have someone in your workplace that you can trust? It doesn't have to. It's great if it's your manager because we know the 70% impact to my well-being comes from that relationship. But have I got a peer that I sit next to that I can trust, that I could share something with? Do I have HR? Is there an HR professional there that I might be able to go to and talk about this as well? So it can be a matter of is there a trusted person somewhere in the organisation? Sometimes just by having one person can be an enormous difference. It could be a peer, and that peer says, "Hey, we've got an employee assistance program. We've got a counselling service that you could look into or whatever."
Okay.
And
Okay.
so great if it's your manager, but if you're struggling at work, see if there is someone that you can trust.
Okay. The neurodiverse term, I'm really sorry. Can you just define it again? It's new to me. I just want to make sure I'm not confusing it with something else. What's a neurodiverse?
Neurodiversity is really a terminology that's used to describe people that might process the world, interact in the world, behave in the world slightly differently. I take in information in a different way to what we call the neurotypical population, which is kind of how the world is set up to function for neurotypical people.
Mm-hmm.
So neurodiversity now is classified. There's quite a few different diagnoses that form the neurodiversity,
Such as?
falling under that neurodiversity spectrum. It can be dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, ASD. So there's a number of diagnoses that sit under the terminology neurodiversity, and
Okay.
each of those is on a bit of a spectrum.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely misunderstood what it was, but it makes perfect sense now. Yeah. Mental health days. Should that be a mandatory in all companies? And what do you understand mental health days? Is it the fact that within the sick days that employees are entitled to, at least in our country in Australia, 10 days, correct? Yep. Does it mental health days? Does it mean that I should be able to take some days off as part of my 10-day entitlement under that banner, or should it mean you need a few more on top of those 10? How do you understand
It really depends on the size of your organisation and how supportive you can be. I know organisations where it's quite typical that people can take a mental health day out of the 10 days
Okay.
of the sick. That is the most typical situation, is that, again, we're not differentiating with sick leave,
Okay.
whether that's a physical
Sure.
issue, a physical health issue, or a mental health issue. We're
So
not
that would be the
differentiating.
first part of your mission.
That would be
is
the
for
first
companies
part.
to acknowledge
Yes.
that mental health is just as important as physical health. And
That's
if people want to
right.
take some time off because of that, it should be okay. It should be completely acceptable. They shouldn't be frowned upon.
That's
That would be
correct.
part of your mission.
And great if people disclose it to say, hey, is it okay if I take tomorrow or the next day off on a bit of a mental health day and it just needs some time to reset? I'm really fatigued. I've got this issue going on. And that's where it works really well. In our experience, when people in our team have done that, they're able to come back to work and they're performing well and they're kind of back on their game again.
Okay.
It might not be 100%, but it's better than people taking 2 or 3 weeks off and maybe putting in a psychological injury claim. So if you look at it maybe through that early intervention, I think it's quite mature of people to say, if I can maybe take 1 or 2 days of my sick leave for a mental health day, I can just nip that in the bud. It's that early intervention strategy. It's better to catch it early than
Mm.
late. I do know some organisations where they are more generous, where they actually have employees do have some entitlements additional to the 10 days. But it's more typical that it's under
Um,
the 10 days.
okay, very interesting. Really interesting. Oh my gosh, I just remembered. Okay, so I had a young person here, when I say young, early 20s, very early 20s, started in the company, and I could see they were going through some tough time that put some mental pressure on them, psychological pressure on them. They were going through some events, certain things in life, a breakup, etc. And they were wanted to take days off and confusing things with working from home versus taking a day off. And the idea is, oh, I'll say I want to work from home, but I know they're not going to be probably working because they're not feeling great, struggling.
Yeah.
And I thought that if I'm too soft with them, anytime they don't feel the best, they go, I'm going to take a day off. That's not the right policy. Something inside me told me that's bad.
Okay.
You got to be a bit tougher in the sense, at least to help them to bring it to a head. Look, you really need to deal with what's going on. You can't just say, oh, I don't feel
Correct.
good, I'm going to stay at home, and you're doing.
Oh,
well,
yes, that's
because
not good.
because you're going. It's not helping after a while.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4 times a year is okay, but when it becomes too much, you start to realize, okay, so now the company started to feel I'm adding less value. I'm not building my career the way it want to be. Do you know what I mean? Like being too soft sometimes it can be bad because you're hiding from dealing with the problem.
That's correct. Yes, yes. So if you can combine it with, if you are an organisation where you can partner with an organisation like ours, and there's others out there that offer that employee assistance program support. So we have one for our staff, an external provider, where we would say to our staff, sorry to hear you're going through that challenging time. Can I help you to facilitate a link in to the EAP? Because that's when you're getting the skills. If I can
link
get
into what?
to the employee assistance
Okay.
program, which is what an organisation would fund for employees to have access to that short-term solution-focused counselling. If you're not able to do that, if you're a smaller employer and you're not able to do that, you want to try to facilitate people to actually go into their GP and be able to perhaps get a referral through a Medicare plan in to see a treating psychologist that way. If it's a repeated issue, if it's more than like 1 or 2 days, and this is now a repeated issue, people need that guidance sometimes, and sometimes I don't have any idea about the Medicare scheme, or it never even crossed my mind. Whereas if a leader is a little bit more educated around that, I can guide somebody into that. Have you thought about seeing your GP? Have you thought about getting a referral here into this particular service? Because if people can access that support, even if it's for a short time, you should see the gains on the work performance side. I'm more likely to be back at work. I'm more likely to be focused. I'm more likely to be performing better.
Yeah. That's why, Rachel, I was thinking, I'm 100% agree. Thanks for you bringing this to my attention as well, that we should make it clear in the company that mental health those 10 days do include mental health as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure that's the case. That's absolutely clear in my mind.
That's a great thing, because a lot of time people, it's silent, right?
Sure.
So it becomes silent. And that's another way of creating psychological safety is just a simple thing like that to differentiate it.
However, I guess I'm implying indirectly here that's still capped.
Correct.
And I'm happy to increase it. I'm
capped.
going to actually increase the 10 days to 15 and say mental health will be covered in here. Completely okay. Mental health or physical health are equally okay. But it needs to be capped, what I'm trying to say.
Correct. Yes.
Otherwise, it's not actually, you're really not doing a favor by not making sure they need to really deal with the issues. They need to realize, look, there's an issue here. You've taken all this time off. You can't just keep doing it lightly like that. You've got to deal with this. You've got to talk about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
That's right. Yes. And then again, it's that point of, like, sometimes organisations will fund that counselling support. If you're a smaller organisation, you don't even need to buy into a whole expensive program. There are options for you to be able to pay just piecemeal. You're sent an anonymous invoice, hasn't got any employee's name on it, and you might just pay for three or four sessions.
Yeah.
But that has meant your employee is at work, they're performing better, they're focused, they're attending.
Yeah.
We've stopped that little problem from getting a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to make it 15 days. I'm going to change it in our contract. I'm going to talk to the team about it, and I'm going to talk about how mental health issues are included it's covered. 15 days.
It gets back to what we were saying before, isn't it, about why do we differentiate the mindset? And we often think around,
Mental
those
and
sick days
physical,
are for physical.
Mental fitness, mental health
Mental
fitness.
fitness, yeah.
fitness.
It's
Oh my
better to
gosh.
have someone take a mental health day.
Yeah.
Nip something in the bud. People might say, I'm so fatigued. I've got this personal issue going on. I haven't slept for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I need a day to reset.
Okay. All right. Do you think mental health days, that's what we've just covered. What's the secret to setting boundaries at work without risking your job? So I guess this is coming from, I spoke with the person that asked me to include that question. They're saying, for example, it's very similar, borderline, or the same as the right to disconnect.
Yeah.
The boundaries that, look, after 8 hours, after 10 hours, it starts to affect my mental health. I know that you've created a scheme for me where the more I work, the more I earn, etc. But still, I really can't do it. Maybe that's one of their boundaries.
Yep.
So, do you encourage people to do that? And should companies encourage that kind of environment where conversation is had and the boundaries can be created?
Yeah, well, I think if somebody, again, feels comfortable to disclose, hey, I do have this mental health issue in the background, and the way I operate best is to work until whatever time. And for those 8 hours or 9 hours or whatever it is, I can give you 100%. But it starts to impact me if it goes over that, and I really need to, engage in strategies after work to be able to keep on top of my mental health. So I'm kind of working at staying well. I think if the best thing is if you can talk about that in the workplace, because then my manager's on board as well. And I'm not sitting there again thinking, oh my goodness, here I am leaving work at 5:30 or whatever, and everyone else is staying there for longer. So if you can disclose that and talk about that, again, what helps you to perform at your best? That might be, I've got to be more sustainable.
Yeah.
My well-being has to be, my mental health, in order to be sustainable. This is something I need to do to look after myself.
Yeah.
If you can't disclose that or feel as if you can't, it's harder. But you just needing to take the personal responsibility for oneself and having that switch off time. What time is my switch off time? If I've been delegated something, maybe I talk to you and say, yeah, I'm happy to take that on, but that means that these other 3 things that I've got here, can you help me prioritize? Because happy to assist, but let's work on the priorities and let's have that expectations kind of conversation. It could be putting up boundaries in that way. It could be actually just saying, no, I'm actually at capacity at the moment. Happy to help you with that project or that task, but actually I'm not clear for another week. Happy to start that as soon as I get capacity for that. So there's ways that we can put up boundaries in our communication in a respectful, constructive manner to be able to have that sustainability.
Someone who's coming back to work from a mental or psychological injury, what can an employer do to make that environment better for that person?
Well, given we've been talking about the research on supportive leadership, that is a huge one. Accelerate, make visible, make present your supportive leadership. Welcome that person back. Make sure that they feel comfortable, that welcome back. We've really, missed having you around. Making sure that the team are there, we're ready to receive that person. I would be talking to the person, how do you want to be facilitated back into the business? What's going to work best for you? Because they might say, I don't want people coming up and asking me how I'm going every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Normally people say that. So it might just be, okay, we're going to have a central point of contact, and that might be the leader. It might be, let's have a catch up once a week to check in, see how you're going. Others might say, actually, I'd really appreciate a little daily check-in to help me plan my day. active workload management to make sure that I'm not overloaded, that I'm
Okay.
working on things where I'm feeling
Okay.
a sense of progress and achievement. That's really
Okay.
important when I'm coming back to
Okay.
work. So it's around the conversation that you have before someone comes back around how we're going to set this up for success. What's going to make you feel most comfortable? Can we give you some flexibility to work from home? 1 or 2 days if the travel into work is a little bit fatiguing for the first 2 weeks? Is it that we could give you a little bit of flexibility to go and maintain your appointments with your psychologist once a week? Is it that we can give you a little bit more flexibility in the projects or the task allocation? And I might have a daily kind of check-in meeting with you from a work perspective, making sure that things are manageable. I might give you some positive feedback to kind of, go out of my way to do that. But it's around, again, I want to know if this isn't working. Let's have those really clear kind of expectations conversations, but let's have this progress reviews. How's the first week gone? Is it working? Is it not working? Where are we going well? Where's getting off track for you?
So, okay, on this note, Rachel, you're amazing. You've had an incredible impact on me. I'm not going to sleep all night. I'm going to process what I've learned from you today. Thank you very, very much. And I wish you all the very best to you and the business.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
You're absolutely welcome. We'll have you on again in probably 3-6 months' time. All the best. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.